I was the first reporter on the scene
Mhm.
for the murder of John Lennon.
Take me through that.
I had just met a source at the FBI and was taking the bus home because I couldn't afford a taxi. Really, they didn't pay me that well.
Mm.
And my apartment was 2 blocks away from the Dakota on the Upper West Side of New York, where Lennon lived. And I got off the bus and saw across the street in front of the Dakota 2 or 3 police cars and an ambulance. And I sort of walked over, and they said, someone just shot John Lennon. And I ran across the street, and there were still payphones, got on the payphone and called the NBC news desk. And that was the first I'd heard of it. And I stayed on the phone. And I ended up being the person who announced on the interrupter of the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, John Lennon is dead. That was me. And it was just a coincidence. I found myself in the middle of so many different stories. I feel a little bit like what's that character that Tom Hanks played? You sort of end up. I took that bus and ended up right there, and that's what I saw.
Forrest Gump.
Yeah, Forrest Gump.
That instance there. Here is somebody who was a part of not just Americana, but just he transcends that. John Lennon was an iconic figure worldwide. So beloved for his contributions to the Beatles. Yep. So beloved even after that, even with the controversial breakup of the Beatles. I imagine you were a fan of his.
Yep. And it still gives me chills because it was a warm December night. Mm-hmm. And in my apartment, I had the windows open. I got home like at 2 or 3. And all night into the morning, I could hear crowds singing, "Give Peace a Chance." All we were saying is "Give peace a chance," over and over and over and over, as thousands, tens of thousands.
I look at it this way: I got enough fruit salad here. Been on television. I was on basically a show on Dateline with Brian, whatever his name is, right after 9/11. So I've had plenty of media exposure, so I don't need any more. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of great stories, a lot of great firemen, a lot of great heroic situations that they never got a medal, they never got anything out of it. And you know what? Damn it, I'm telling their story. So why lose it to history when you could get it out there, whether it's your show or anybody's show, and tell them, hey, this is what happened. This is the beginning. Because I think you do the audience a disfavor by not showing all the warts, everything else, and the good times. I mean, if someone's going to make a valued thought on me as Mike Milner, then I got to tell them the good and the bad, the ups and the downs. Because if I don't, I'm only giving one side of the equation, and that's not how you're going to be able to judge me. You're going to judge me on the total package. What I did, what I did wrong.
I agree completely, and that's really the vein of this show because. Especially, after last year, I was kind of sitting around 2 years ago now. I keep forgetting we're in 2022 now, so I have to say 2 years ago. That's really the vein of the show because I was sitting around, I was reading these fascinating stories, and I tell this story often. When I graduated, I got many gifts when I graduated. I'm thankful for that. One of the gifts, because I've been wanting to read this book for a while, was a book on the bomb squad, where ABC News spends a year in the bomb squad. These men are very humble, much like the FDNY rescue guys. They don't make a big deal of what they do. They just prefer to do it and move on, and they treat it like another day's work. But the stories are so incredible that I said to myself, oh, no. If I can help it, we're getting this on the record. Yes. Because has it been told in a book? Yeah. Has it been on television? Yeah. Still riding, I watch at least once or twice a year. But long-form conversations like this, where the filters, or most of them at least, come off, that's the best way to do it.
And you know why, Mike? Because we are flesh and blood.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? I'm not Paul Newman or someone else on a television show. This is the real skinny. And, I think, like I said, I just think it's important that people know the entire package of your job because it's not always that easy. I mean, did we spend a lot of time doing nothing? Yeah, that's what firemen do.
Yeah.
They train, you can't.
There's quiet days. That's good. Nobody's in peril.
You can't train 6 hours. Come on. That's just, I mean, you'd go to the Rock, there'll be probies like this, sleeping, because it's a long day. Mm-hmm. So what do you want to get? Would you rather get 2 or 3 good hours out of a rescue guy and then take the rest of the day? All right, let's go out for dinner. let's pick up the meal. Let's have a good time. Let's go diving. It's just a fun thing. Or, I mean, I must have went to 20,000 bodegas and delis all over Queens to get the best sandwich. Or go to the Jackson Hole Diner for a good burger.
Allegedly.
Yeah, or Starbucks. Well, see, we weren't alleged because we were 10-8. So we had the entire city. So if we were in Rockaways, the chief wasn't going to go, why are they here? He would assume they're supposed to be there. If I had a regular company and I'm in the Rockaways, something's wrong.
Right.
So it just was great. My thought process was always, I never took it seriously. There were a lot of guys better than me. I enjoyed that kind of atmosphere in rescue where you could do whatever you want and it was promoted. I was the funny guy at work. I mean, I think I got pictures of me dressed up as a leprechaun or something. I don't know. And I have a bra on in one of the shots. But, I like to have fun. It was a lot. Listen, I had a lot of bad times. So that was one of my therapies to keep, my ticker going properly.
Yeah.
So I like to have fun. And I even made fun of myself. So that was never an issue. But I liked having fun. So,
now, this is the mecca of all things. It's the crossroads of the world. Sports, news, certainly. And when that offer comes, when that opportunity arises, however it may arise, you talked earlier about taking deep breaths. You probably take the deepest breath of all when you're looking at the opportunity to work in the Big Apple. But you were comfortable in Nashville. You liked Nashville. Nashville is no small market in its own right. It's a very big city, as you well know. How did that opportunity come about, and what went through your mind as you were weighing this offer and ultimately wound up accepting it?
Remember that guy I told you that I really loved and follow him all around? It was because of him again.
Oh, of course. Yes.
He got called up and selected to teach up at West Point. He's an 05 West Point grad, and he went back to be a TAC officer and had an opportunity to go to Columbia for grad school. And I said, okay, I'm kind of young. I don't have a ton of experience. Like, what are you doing to me? Like, how am I going to get a job in New York City? And funny enough, a software platform that a company that we used in Nashville was trying to get into the New York market, and they had used some of my reports as an example. So I get a call from a news director at WCBS who's like, hi, so we're not going to buy the software that this company sent, but I asked who you were and I tracked down your information. I thought it was a joke. I was like, yeah, right. Yeah, you just saw me and called me. He didn't interview me. He said, if you can be here in 2 weeks, you've got a job. And I said, okay, I will be there in 2 weeks. And Ty wasn't moving up there yet, but I moved to Jersey City. I have some family there. So I lived right in Bowers. And I said, all right, like I'll do this. And for 6 months, I was up there alone, and it was awesome. And I was just so excited. I don't really live in fear, and maybe sometimes I should, but I just think this is what an opportunity. People dream of this. Like I have to be wonderful. I have to be great.
I'll ask you, what advice would you give a young firefighter coming on the job now?
You have to be a student of the business, be a student of the job. That's what I tell people all the time. So when you come on the job, you have to continually stay in the game. You get your training, but it's all about a little personal responsibility. Become and stay a student of the business, a student of the job. There are more resources out there today than anywhere via the internet and all these different websites. So you can stay on top of your game, even when you're not going to fires and emergencies. You could always be on top of your game if you take the time to do it. So become a student and stay a student of the job.
You've written a book on it, as we'll discuss. If you can give us a glimpse into the mind of a suicide bomber, I guess for lack of a better way to ask the question, how do they do it?
Listen, there's a whole list of specific reasons. But I always say the primary reason is not even religious. It's the concept of being a rock star. You have to understand, and I can speak for here in Israel, you go to certain Palestinian cities and you have squares and buildings and schools named after the suicide bomber. So this is the fashion. Whenever I do my presentations on suicide bombing specifically, I play, my version of I Want to Be a Rock Star, which is, I think, by ZZ Top. And, that's my personal, and they have a great video that goes with it. The cop in Grand Central singing. I mean, it's a great video, and there's the radicalization, mantra of you want to be a hero, you want to be a rock star. That's what you do. So I would say that's number one. They talk about sexual frustration. They talk about blackmail. They'll blackmail a family. One of the worst bombings I went to was in Haifa, and it was a 29-year-old lawyer. She supposedly had two motivations. One is she was divorced, which in that culture is extremely negative. And secondly, her brother had died in a battle with soldiers. He himself was a terrorist and he got killed. So that was more of like retribution and this financial rewards. But to me, the number one thing you always would hear about is the manipulation by the leadership into saying you want to be a hero, sacrifice yourself, and they give you all the reasons why. Plus, the family will be compensated financially for the rest of their life. So there's a whole list of, they'll take somebody who's, not too bright, and they'll manipulate them to the point where they'll get them riled up enough that, sure, I'll do it. So I think that's, in a simplistic way.
Point blank, at a killer's core, well, just that. What is at a killer's core? It has to be more than depravity.
So, yeah, there are numerous factors that go into the making of a killer. For example, I was at the BTK sentencing, and I'll talk about that in particular. Mm-hmm. I tell you, when I left that courthouse, I covered that for Fox, and I really was crying like a child at the airport. Why? Because he stood there proud as could be, referring to himself in the third person and taking complete responsibility for these projects that he called his victims that he murdered and bound and tortured and then had twisted sex with corpses. I mean, somebody like that is made, first of all, they start out being deviants, all right? There's something obviously wrong with the way they perceive the world. But yet, many of these people are able to have that double life. They can compartmentalize. And so the one side, he's working as a dog catcher, he has a job with the city, he's involved with his church, he's a deacon in the church, whatever case. I mean, he's got that family life and all of that. On the other side, he's prowling the streets of Wichita for 30 years. And when you talk about a boogeyman, he was the boogeyman. Okay. And somehow he takes solace in this. He thinks this is great because once he satisfied the urge of killing what he was going to kill, just one woman, now the urge becomes stronger and stronger. And what I find is killers can't help themselves. And this is why, if you look, for example, Durst, he got away with the thing in Texas. He got away with killing his wife, Kathleen. Now he went to his best friend, Susan Berman. It escalates for them. It becomes a game. It becomes a twisted game. And I don't know if partially it's because they can't get that out of their mind. I think so. This is what I think. When you kill somebody, it's not easy. I don't care how depraved you are. But once you've done it, now that runs in your mind. That tape is running in your mind all the time. You're living with some consciousness of guilt. Even if you're a psychopath, even if you're a serial killer, you are still playing that tape over and over in your mind. You can't just forget it. Okay? So it kind of snowballs on itself for these people who become serial killers or killing more than one person. And it may not be, there'll be a number of years between where nothing happened, like Durst, like BTK, like this guy, Carl Carlson. There's a number of years, nothing happened. But somehow or another, they get back to that depraved moment because, again, they got away with it once, and then it's twice, and then it's another time. So, it's circumstances as well as the depraved mind. And obviously, there's something in the brain of killers, of murderers, of people who are willing to take another's life that is missing, isn't right. And there's been study about it, the anatomy of a murder. I'm aware of those kinds of studies. And again, what they say is, yes, there's something in the brain that's not quite the same if you do a scan of the brain than normal people. But because we don't understand the brain, because we only use allegedly 5 or 6% of our brain, we don't really have a grasp or a full sense of what it is piece they're missing, how it is that they really have no sense of, forget about empathy, they have no sense of responsibility, they have no sense of humanity, they have no sense of the worth of human life. I mean, how that happens is as much a symptom of what their circumstances are and what they've gotten away with as it is how their brain works and malfunctions. And I don't know that we'll ever quite get in there.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about this. They had pins in there, you know, for more shrapnel. This here is definitely a blasting cap. You can see it in here. And this is the C4 itself. And this is your battery. So, and this is your little pull switch. When you take out the envelope, it sends juice into the battery, and the battery is going to set the blasting cap off, and then the blasting cap here will set off the Semtex. That's a much better shot. You know, there's nothing really destroyed, but they did have pins in these things. I forgot all about that.
Paul, what can you add?
No, I concur. Same thing. The battery pack and the switching mechanism, like a gift card. And I remember the pins and the blasting cap was bent like squashed like elliptical. Wasn't round, wasn't cylindrical. It was more of a elliptic, kind of like an egg shape, kind of. And to do something like that, it's pretty nervy to put any pressure on a blasting cap. They're so sensitive to even static electricity.
Was there anything, without giving any secrets away, of course, for you, Don, that was raising your eyebrow prior to this incident in regards to terrorism around the world and the potential for incidents in New York?
Nothing directly. I was very fortunate. I had liaison, of course, with the UN from working there prior. I also had an excellent relationship with the Israelis. I had an excellent relationship with the Brits and the Canadians, and with the State Department. By this time, I had my clearances, and I'm not going to say the name of our contact, but the guy from the State Department in the New York field office was just outstanding. I would come down every 2 weeks and was allowed to be briefed on anything that might even relate to the bomb squad. And what I had to do as kind of rules of the game, you can't use the names of anybody named in a report, you know, from overseas. But I could use the name of a group. I couldn't say who the bomb maker was, but that they were active doing stuff in Europe or doing stuff in the Middle East. And I would put a report together and bring it back to the bomb squad and put it up on a clipboard in the back room and just try to make sure all the teams, you know, when I had a chance, take a look at it. This is the latest intelligence I was able to bring back. And that's pretty much how I operate.
Anyone becoming a cop now, I would highly suggest you to be open-minded. You're going to have factions of negativity to surround you in connection with media, in that you'll see cops getting spit on at these demonstrations. You'll have other people that are police officers that'll tell you this is the worst job going. You have friends and family that'll say, why do you want to become a cop? But the truth of the matter, or the standing order, is you have to do what you're most comfortable doing. And this can be a wonderful career to be a part of if you put your all into it. Anything that you do in life, if you put the minimum into it, you'll get the minimum. If you put the maximum into it, you'll get the maximum. And policing is no different. You can rise to the rank of police commissioner, or you can stay in a position that's nominal in the department that doesn't satisfy you nor the individuals around you. So do the best that and it's not this be all you can be Army commercial, but the more that you put into it, the more it manifests on the back end. And I highly encourage any and everyone that elects to become a member of a police department to focus on that philosophy.
Do I have, in that aspect, I got respect for those guys. They were into life, they believed in the life, and they died in the life and by the life. Do I lose sleep over that? Not a bit. Not a bit. Didn't bother me one bit. Like I say, would I rather that Sonny it didn't get killed? Yeah. Jilly, yeah. Mira, I'm not too sure. Didn't bother me one bit that he got killed. He should have got killed earlier.
Yeah.
In fact, I remember one time he, like I said, remember I told you can't insult a wise guy in front of other wise guys. And we're in a restaurant one morning having breakfast. It's probably 3, 4 in the morning, and his eggs come out cold. Well, so he starts belittling this guy. This guy was the meanest guy I ever met. I mean, I don't think he had 1 ounce of redeeming virtue or value or whatever. And he just demeans this waitress. And all I says, Tony, it's not her fault. The place is jammed. Maybe it's been sitting in the kitchen and just put it out. Well, he lays into me. I mean, it lays into me. And I can't say anything because we're with other wise guys. The next morning, though, or the next day, we're down in Little Lady, and I said, hey, Tony. I said, let me tell you something. I said, I couldn't say anything last night. Now, and these 2 guys can vouch this. On the street, you gotta maintain your respect and credibility. And I said, Tony, don't ever talk to me like that again in front of other people. I says, I know I can't do anything about other people. I said, but if you do it again to me one more time, I'll stab you when you and I are by ourselves. I said, I'll put a knife in you. Don't ever talk to me like that again. And from that day on, whenever I had any words with him, I made sure I was an arm's length away. He was cuckoo. He was crazy than a bed bug. I mean, I seen him. I got in bar fights with him. When he was on my side, and he was a madman. I mean, but with him, I didn't have any problem.
You're building a business. We put together an executive summary. We put together a full business plan, and I'm talking hundreds of pages of stuff, everything on how the platform works. And if anyone's visited fundthefirst.com, you'll see it's an intricate platform. What we built is something for those who serve their families and their friends to come to and to fundraise. Mike, you could come on our platform and you can organize a campaign for me. I can go on the platform and organize a campaign for you. It's all the way it's verified. By you doing it for me, there's a notification that gets sent to me via email, as long as nothing's happened to me and I'm available. I get sent via email that you started a campaign for me on fundthefirst.com. I will then verify through ID.me. ID.me is a verification processor. They're building out Web 3.0 right now for verification across the country. They're one of the biggest companies in the nation. But we're partnered with ID.me. And by doing that, we allow for all beneficiaries and organizers in certain instances to verify and allow for donors to have a true and honest source to donate their money to. And that's what's important in the space of crowdfunding. So we launched in July of 2019. We've been on the news over probably 150 times. I've been on Fox and Friends 3 times, NBC, you name it. We've been there. We've been all over the place. What we've done for the nation in 18 short months is 293 crowdfunding campaigns that have raised a combined $2.9 million. The average crowdfunding campaign on our platform raises between $7,000 and $10,000. It's incredible. And we are just the median. We're the platform that people come to. And we're blessed to say on top of that, we're blessed that we were able to be the ones that hosted the campaign for Jason Rivera and Wilbert Mora. That campaign is currently ongoing on our platform. Members of the 32nd Precinct organized it on our platform. All the money will be going to those two families, and it's currently at $290,000 raised in 2 days. 2 days. So that's incredible.
If there's something like really important operationally, it was in the beginning of the meeting, but it was rare that there was something operational because I trusted my inspectors that worked in the borough. I trusted the precinct commanders that if a new direction came out and it was clear what the direction was, I don't need to speak about it in a meeting. My meetings were suggestions and tips, checking on officers when they, when they have a line of duty injury that may have looked minor and you don't hear from them for 2 weeks because maybe their life has changed because of it. Stopping off in the community council president's house on a nice summer afternoon to just say hello before the meeting that you're required to be at. In the transit bureau, I don't mean to jump ahead, but we had this sign in every single facility, and it said, and it was a big poster. It was on a display, and it said, "Mission first, people always. Mission first, people always." And when you do one without the other, you're lost. And in those meetings, I started smiling before because I've heard this numerous times that again, being retired, people tell me things they wouldn't tell me before. But amongst the COs, the word was that you could be at a scene as a captain of 3 people shot and get a call from Chief Fox. And, chances are he's not calling you about the 3 people shot. He's calling to see how a cop who was diagnosed with cancer 6 months ago is doing. So does that mean I don't care about the 3 people shot? Absolutely. But I know that commanding officer knows what to do. Now, it doesn't mean I didn't contribute and, of course, come up with some ideas and check on things. I mean, it's part of it. But my primary focus was the people, because if you take care of the people and if you support them, if you nurture them, if you give them training, if you give them motivation, if you do all of these things, they will do it. Listen, I did it. When I was a precinct commander, I knew how to run my command. And it was inspiration from Pat Brennan that I got, not necessarily direction. And that's what made me a better CO.
Wanted that opportunity. I was glad that I got that opportunity. But going back to something you said, when I'm out there, when I was on the job and I was out there speaking at different engagements, I would always say the NYPD has over 200 specialty units. And you mentioned a few of them, right? In the harbor and the aviation, all that. But there's 200 specialty units. So very talented people. Men and women in ESU, men and women SOD, aviation, right? The bomb squad. These are very talented people who have a propension for that niche in policing, which is so important. It's not everyone wants to be that, that aviation officer, right? I couldn't do it. I never flew a helicopter. I have no interest in doing it. But there are those that are so talented in doing it. So it's amazing the NYPD affords you all these opportunities to do it. So with that, in 97, I took over the stewardship of the ceremonial unit. I did want to change certain things. I wanted to change the way we do business. I wanted to change, having a full-time color guard. We started designing a new uniform, an honor guard uniform. A few departments around the country had it. We used to go every May down to the police memorial in Washington, D.C. at the Capitol and have the president, the vice president, the head of justice sometimes speak. And I realized some departments had a honor guard uniform. It took 3 years to get it from drawing it on a piece of paper to actually having the officers wear it. We unveiled it in 2000. But it was to step up what we did, go to the commands and find out, do they have medal days and family days? Let's go and help them with those. And the reason why is everyone knew it was for funerals. No one knew it was for ceremonies. So let's go to the precincts, the transit districts, the PSAs, and say, do you have a family day? And the family day, for those listeners who don't know, it's where mom and dad bring their children in, show them where they work, get to meet the other kids of other parents who are police officers, and there's mounted there. There's a robot there. There's all these things. There's a clown for coloring. It's a great day. And then usually the commanding officer of that precinct will hand out certificates of recognition of a job well done, maybe a burglary pattern that was solved. So we went around to precincts, said, if you do it, we want to enhance it. We'll come and MC it. We'll print up the programs, and we built that out. And the same thing we did with the fraternal organizations. We have, when I first was there, 32 fraternal organizations, and those organizations represent Irish police officers, women police officers, Christian officers, Jewish, Muslim officers, Russian now. It's almost 50 of fraternal organizations. And there are parades around the city. Not all of them are on Fifth Avenue that highlight their heritage. And we wanted to come. We wanted to bring the band. We wanted to bring the color guard. We wanted to make the NYPD show its diversity. And that's really the key of why the NYPD is different than every other department. Every other department has wonderful officers, great training, very brave. Difference is the amount of diversity we have. So we started with the parades. We started with the family days. We built out some of these ceremonies, and it gave us a different dimension than just knowing us.
I stopped back maybe 3 or 4 car lengths from the car. I wanted to give room because I didn't know what this guy's next move was. So when we jump out of the car, we start to run towards the vehicle. All I remember seeing was the reverse lights come on, the black puff of smoke comes out of the tailpipe. And before I could even make a move, I get pushed from the right from Joe, my partner, Joe Calderera, pushes me out of the way. I go to the left, and the car just goes flying past me like in a split second. 1 second or 2 seconds more, I probably would have been under the car. He pushed me. He went to the right. Now that the guy backed up, because he couldn't get back onto the sidewalk from where he was, he cleared a spot. There was a driveway. He goes back onto the sidewalk again. And now as he's driving down to try and make the corner, I will never forget this as long as I live. It's like it happened yesterday, and it's over 30 years ago. There's a woman pushing a baby carriage, and she's got one hand on the carriage, and she's got one hand on a toddler. There was an infant in the carriage, and there was a toddler in her right hand. And we start to scream, "Look out, look out." And she turns and she sees the car racing down at her. In one swoop, she grabs the toddler and she grabs the carriage and she gets the baby out of the carriage and she dives onto a parked car. It was something like an Olympic athlete could have learned something from this woman. But I guess the instincts of being scared that she was about to be run over, this guy was not stopping. Her children were her priority, obviously. She dives onto the car. The car goes flying past her. And now there's the stop sign on the corner, and there's an old man with a cane, and he's getting ready to cross. And we're screaming, "Look out, look out." And like I said, he was facing this way now, and he's getting ready to cross the intersection in the crosswalk. And when we start to scream, "Look out, look out," he turns this way. The guy hits the stop sign, and the stop sign goes crashing down and just narrowly misses him. And now he makes it to 12th Avenue, and he takes off down 12th Avenue towards the higher numbers. Now, Joe is trying to help the woman. I run out into the middle of 12th Avenue. Now, my car is maybe 5-6 car lengths back. I have my shield out. I have my gun out. And I start flagging down the first car that I see. Now, the first car that I see, now the car that we were chasing was like I said, it was either 77, 78 Chevy Caprice Classic 4-door navy blue. The first car that stops, it's Borough Park. It's 2 Hasidic Jews. And I flagged down, I got my gun in my hand and I'm going like this. The car comes to a screeching halt. The passenger doesn't see my badge. The passenger thinks he's being robbed and he takes off running. So I tell the driver, "I need a police emergency. I need your car." And I pull him out of the car. And he's like, "Where you going, my car?" I said, "I need your car. I need your car." And I take him out. He goes, "I'm coming with you." And he tries to get into the back seat. And I said, "No, you're not." I jump into the car and I throw it into gear and I just take off.
Finally, the Monsignor, it's a Catholic-run facility, after several warnings, invited him now to leave. "Sorry, Larry, after several warnings, you're not abiding by the rules. You have to leave." So he gathers up his few belongings in a backpack. He starts walking along streets of New York City. Again, realizes he's got no money, he's got nowhere to go, no food. That's when he decides to just end his life. He's able to bypass security after Madame Tussauds wax machine gets to the rooftop, and that's where that picture is taken. So as I'm speaking with him, he's telling me that he's got no purpose in life. I had asked him, I said, Larry, can you please tell me what is so bad in your life that deserves a death sentence? And that's when he told me, I have no purpose in life. So at that, just about that time, he just told me that one of my negotiators was up on the rooftop with me, Detective Chris Breslin, is going through his backpack. And he comes up with a notebook, spiral kind of notebook like that. And you'll see me holding that in my hand. And it was his innermost writings, his innermost feelings. And one passage, Chris Breslin says to me, hey, Lieutenant, just read this one paragraph. And the paragraph said something, and I'm paraphrasing. We must serve as a beacon of light to the underprivileged children of the world in order to show them the right path. So I asked him about it. I said, Larry, did you just write this? And I read it. He goes, where'd you get that? I said, well, we got it in your backpack. We're trying to identify who you are. Did you write that? And he says, yes, I wrote that. Well, Larry, you just told me that you have no purpose in life, and this tells me very differently. And I can help you with that. I could put you in touch with resources right now that can make you an intern in helping underprivileged children. There are many different agencies across the city that do that type of work. And maybe in time you become, get a paid position on that, as a counselor. But I can help you with that right now. So I'm giving you the short version, but finally how it ended, I said to Larry, I said, listen, Larry, when you are ready to come down off that ledge onto the rooftop, I'm going to give you my business card. It was my business information, my office phone number, my office email, nothing personal. And I says, when you get out, we're going to take you to Bellevue Hospital. You're very sane in your mind. I don't suspect you're going to be there more than a day or two. And then when you come out, you're going to call me. And I'm going to help you. So based on that, there's another photo in that series of him actually coming off that ledge. And then,
I'll show it now.
Oh, there you go. You have it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we escorted him to the hospital, to Bellevue. There you go. There you go. Now you see, this had to be something that Larry had to agree to on his own. With that metal girder there, the barrier, there was no way that myself, that's me in the foreground, trying to grab him, like I can hardly reach him, I can't reach him in fact. And emergency service could not have gotten to him in the background before he would have jumped because of that girder. So it had to be something that he wanted to do to believe in. I think the very best negotiators, and I'm not including myself in this category, but the very best negotiators are those that can get people to do what you need them to do by allowing them to believe that it's their idea. Getting them to do what you need them to do while allowing them to believe that it's their idea. So fast forward, about 2 days later, after he's out of the hospital, he just gets out. I'm in my office. He calls me. Yes, Larry, you told me to call you. Yeah, Larry. Thank you for calling me. What happened? He said they gave him some medication. They told him to come back in 3 weeks. I said, okay, that's a good thing. I said, Larry, how can I try to help you? So he says to me, I have nowhere to go. I said, okay. I said, I know the Monsignor in Covenant House. I can call him. I can ask him if he'll take you back, but I know what he's going to say. You're going to have to follow the rules. Are you willing to do that? He said, yeah, I'll follow the rules. Okay, then. I'll call you right back. So I called the Monsignor. He knew what was going on exactly. Those pictures that you've been showing, Michael, were in the newspapers. So he saw what was going on. And I asked him, I said, Monsignor, look, he's got nowhere to go. Can you take him back? And I said, before you even say it, I already asked him. He did promise that he would follow the rules. He said, okay, Jack, if he's going to follow the rules, tell him I'm waiting for him. So I called him back and I told him that he's waiting for him. So I never really followed up on these assignments too much. You might be surprised to believe, when I was doing this, we were averaging about 45 assignments per month, hostage type assignments, jumpers, barricade situations, actual hostage situations, where, I teach around the country hostage negotiations. I still do so today. And the average team across the country, maybe, if they handle 10 assignments per year, that's a lot. We were doing 45 per month.
Right.
So I didn't have a chance to really follow up on these assignments. There's just too many. But this one, I took a particular personal interest in it. So the following day, I called up the Monsignor. I was just curious as to whether he showed up or not. And he says, oh, yeah, Jack, he showed up. And right now he's doing what he's supposed to be doing. He's in the bathroom, cleaning the bathrooms. He says, I'll call you if anything changes. So I didn't hear back. So hopefully Larry went on to figure out his life, and maybe, who knows, help those underprivileged children out there.
Story that no one has never told it to anybody. Would you like to hear it first?
Yes, please.
Right after the Voskerichian homicide. I'm in the office, and the phone rings, and I hear a Hispanic man is talking to me, and I hear a woman in the background, and she's speaking Spanish. And he said, "Don't hang up," he says, and he goes on to tell me his wife has these powers and all that kind of stuff. So I'm taking notes, and she's telling me, or he's telling me, he's translating it for me. He's going to hit again. He's going to strike again. He's going to talk to you. He's going to kill a man and a woman. It's going to be on a street, not a street. They're going to be sitting in a car. The car is black and red. And it's kills both a male and a female. I said, okay. Oh, now it's jumped to me. It was just before the Voskerichian homicide. So I write it all down. I go out and I talk to the judge. I just got off the phone, blah, 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 blah. So shortly thereafter, Virginia Voskerichian gets killed. Now, she's a young girl walking on the street on Dartmouth Street. He shoots her right in the lip, and she's DOA at the scene. So we respond, and I'll never forget one of the detectives, I forget his name, he looked up at me and says, "Boy, it looks like that woman was wrong." I said, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah, well." A little while later, months later, I'm home at night. I get a call from Joe Coffey, who was working late. His team worked all night long. They worked. They come in at 10 and they worked till 6 in the morning to cover the everything. So we had 24-hour coverage. So he calls me at the house. He says, he hit again. It's up in the Bronx. I said, okay. So I shoot up to the Bronx. And where is it? It's on the service road of the Hutchinson River Parkway, which is a street, and it's not a street, right? The service road. The car is black and red. The male and female, that's Suriani and Isu, they're both killed. At that scene, there was a letter addressed to me. So, I mean, I'm thinking about the phone call I got from this woman, and I'll give her a name, Mrs. Rodriguez, but that's not her name. But anyway, it was remarkable how she had foreseen this and all. So the first thing I did was, when I got back, I reached out. I had the phone number from her husband. I said, "Can I meet with you and your wife?" And she said, "Of course." So I had made a copy of the letter that was left at the scene addressed to me. I had it in my address. So I picked up her and her husband and talking to her. And I said, "Can you tell me anything about this?" And I handed her a copy of the letter that was addressed to me. It's in an envelope now, folded. She feels it, and she says, "This is to you." And I said, "Oh man, now can you tell me the name of the killer?" That's how she would. So I took her to the scene of the Boyne homicide. And she was kind of fuzzy there. She didn't know. But then 100 yards away is where Christine Voskerichian was killed. So I bring her over there. And as she's walking, she stops in front of this house. And she says, "Something terrible happened in that house." And she said, the person that has trouble walking, there was a homicide in that house. And the suspect, although we never proved it, he had an amputated his foot, so he was on crutches. So now I'm saying this woman. But I got in a little trouble over her too, because I had given her my word that no matter what, I would be the only person dealing with her. I wouldn't reveal her name. I wouldn't do any of that. And I gave her my word. And the Bronx got wind of this woman that was supposed to be going to tell us who the killer was, and they wanted to talk to her. And I said, "Deny, you can't talk to her." I said, "Whatever you want to know, give it to me, and I'll translate it. I'll give it to her." But I promised her I wouldn't give her up, and that got as far as the police commissioner. That I was resisting, But it turned out my card was the police commissioner, and he was my former boss in the tactical patrol force. So he called me. He said, "Joe, what's wrong? Like, why don't you?" I told him. I said, "Look, I gave him my word." I said, "I can't go back on my word." I said, "I would anything they want to know, I'll get it from her. I'll go, give me the questions or whatever, but I can't give her up, So he agreed with me, and that was the end of that. But she never did get beyond that point. But I mean, even thinking about it now, I get goosebumps because she was so right on the money with everything. And even a letter to me, she said, "He's going to talk to you." I said, "Jeez." Thinking about it. So you got it first.
That is what we call a Mike to New Haven exclusive. That's the name of the show, of course. That is an exclusive, and I'm very honored that you chose to share that with me, of all people. So for all my crime reporter friends out there, I got it first. Ha ha.
Going into Indiana, that play wasn't for LJ. They denied Spree. They denied, and the ball got tipped.
Yeah, it's true.
It got tipped, and so LJ and Antonio Davis, I love you, brother. You're my brother. I love you. That was not a foul. That was not a foul. But we're in the garden. Things happen. LJ made a miraculous shot. That's the only picture that I have in my house of the garden. When LJ hit that shot and the fans went crazy. That's the only picture of any memorabilia in my house, because the energy, the roof almost came off the garden, man. I promise you. It was so electric. But me as a point guard, I didn't give a damn about the shot. My focus was the game is tied. LJ was getting ready to put up the L. I said, "Don't you do it. Concentrate on this free throw because the game is tied." And if you watch the tape, he calmed down. The Spree coming and bumping like, "Spree, get off me." LJ makes this free throw because the game is tied. And all you can see him is Wu side. And he calmed down and made the free throw. One of the greatest shots in NBA history.
I had a warrant that I was going to execute on a subject who was a convicted felon with a gun. He needed to be arrested purely. We needed him as a witness in a bigger case. I asked my son's boss if it was okay if my son could be the co-affiant on the application for the warrants, and his boss had no problem because my plan was to give the warrant to my son, have the guy arrested in Broward. He lived in Broward. Point being was when we did the affidavit and we presented ourselves in front of the duty judge, and he sees Michael's son, Miles' son, and the judge gives me this look. He goes, "Are you guys related?" I said, "Your Honor, happens to be my son." He goes, like holy cow, I've never seen that before. How cool is that? My son was sort of like, he was kind of like embarrassed. And I said, one day, and he has a son. I said, one day for posterity, you're going to put that in a frame and show it to your son. And one of my proudest moments is being able to do a father-son warrant. And my ultimate goal is to do one with my daughter, get a father-daughter one, and then I can retire. I can be done. Yeah,
that's the last little check thing.
Yeah, right. That's my last check. That's exactly it. That's why I got one check mark left, and that's it. Is to be able to do that warrant with my daughter, and I'm just proud of both of them. And my daughter-in-law, who I consider to be a daughter, she happens to be a detective with the Broward Sheriff's Office. She does crimes against children and domestic violence. and could be more proud of Alyssa. You know, she's one in a million, and I just love her like a daughter. It's just, the dynamics are great. And I always jokingly say, as a man, you know things are good when you look at your son, and your son is going to go over to his house with my wife, and then my wife and my daughter-in-law are almost like mother and daughter, and then my daughter-in-law looks at my wife as a mom, and I can see my son's face, that peace. Oh, thank goodness my wife and my mom get along. My wife and I know that I walk out of the house, I'm totally content, because like he's content, and it's like and this is all, life is good basically because of having the opportunity to get hired, starting with the Border Patrol and taking it seriously. And my life has always been blessed, but always doing the right thing. I always tell the young guys, I said, the only thing you own is your word and your integrity. And the day they close the lid, you want to be remembered for your integrity and your word. And you can have 1,000 attaboys and one oh boy, and that the 1,000 attaboys do not negate the bad boy. And you live in. I try to impart that into the young agents. Always doing the right thing when no one's looking. That's the motto in law enforcement. And I've always lived by that. And I'm proud when people meet my son and my daughter. They said, "Oh, is your dad Miles?" And they get high kudos instead of like, "Oh man," instead of saying the opposite. "Oh, his father was a jerk," and they would avoid them. So that's the legacy, I always wanted
the Jersey City shootout. It's one thing to get there after something has happened, but you were there during, and you could hear the gunfire in the background.
Mm-hmm.
So, here are the police shooting it out with these two heavily armed individuals, and that the Detective Seals has been shot. He hadn't died yet. He was gravely injured in the hospital, and more people were hurt and ultimately killed in the store where the shootout took place. Being there as it's happening, I don't know how else to ask the question. How the heck did you stay so calm?
I remember that so vividly. First of all, our first responders are tremendous. We were at a safe distance. Well, when we got there, we didn't know what was going on, but we were obviously at a safe distance. They were all running towards it. So I got to say, first and foremost, incredible to run towards that and to be, trying to help and save people. We got there. We had actually been in Central Jersey doing a fun light story at a diner, got the call. We hightailed it out of there and drove to Jersey City. Literally the only line of information we had going into this was an officer may have been shot. That's it. We didn't know anything else. So we pulled up to the area and we got out of the car and immediately heard gunfire. Not just one or two shots, rapid gunfire. And I was with two photographers that day, which is unusual because during the day, usually we're just paired with one. And one of them looked at me and was like, "We got to get out of here." And the other photographer and I looked at each other and we're like, we were trying to assess, we didn't even know what was going on, right? So I looked and I saw an officer kind of blocking the street and I thought, and there were people standing outside, kind of, people who lived in the neighborhood watching. So I'm like, well, if they're out here, we're probably fine. So I said, "You can go if you want. Our station tells us if you feel unsafe, leave, no questions asked." But we all three of us stayed. And we heard, again, more gunfire. And the thing was, it was echoing. So we didn't even know where it was coming from. Sounded like it was coming from here. Sounded like it was coming from here. We saw drones above us. I saw a chopper. And I had been in Jersey City once before during a manhunt. So I knew they were looking for somebody. So I'm like, I don't know. Is there somebody on the building? We didn't know. But you just feel like you're there. You have a job to do. We didn't know if we were in danger, but I didn't in that moment feel like we were necessarily in immediate danger. So we stayed. But I will say there are only 2 times in my career I've ever texted my family just in case. One, I was flying in a B-17 bomber.
I remember that story.
I was like, I don't know if I should be going in this plane. So I texted, I think my parents real quick, like, "Hey, just in case, love you guys." And then, in this moment, I texted my family and I said, "Hey, I just want you to know where I am. I'm okay. But I just want to let you know this is where I am." And of course, everyone's like, "Leave, don't stay there." Yeah. So, thankfully where we were okay. But, those initial moments, like I said, we had that one piece of information. We're hearing gunshots. We don't know where they're coming from. And we're seeing this commotion, this search above us. So, that I'm not a war correspondent, I've not reported overseas. So that was my first experience walking into the most active scene I've ever, experienced.
Era. I mean, 96 to 2000, this was a particularly deadly and dangerous time for the police. I mean, 8 cops between 1996 and 1998 were shot and killed in the line of duty. I'm not counting those that died in auto accidents, or Vinnie Giudice, who was assaulted and bled to death as a result of getting cut on the mirror. So 8 of them were shot. And then, of course, on the other side of the coin, there's the Luima incident, there's the Diallo incident, there's the Dorismond incident. So these are very charged situations, and people are naturally flocking to the papers. Even still, when it happens today, they're flocking to the papers to read a definitive account. But you have to walk that line in getting the facts, but not letting whatever rhetoric is coming from either side affect the column. How difficult a line was that to walk for you?
It wasn't easy then, and it's not easy now. I mean, there is there's always been spin, and there's always been exaggeration. And often people who are telling you things have political agendas in mind. And so it's not easy. And even if you're covering a story that has legs, where you're going to be writing about it for quite a while, and theoretically you have the opportunity tomorrow to come at it from a different angle, you're still on that day, whatever story you're doing that day, it's got to be as balanced as possible. What doesn't help is when it's hard to get official information. It's one thing to get it from sources, but sometimes your sources can be wrong. Your sources are well-intentioned, but they're not necessarily involved in the investigation, or hearing something from someone else. So it's always, particularly on the big stories, it's important to have the people running the show, the people running these agencies, to talk openly about it. And I get sometimes, they want to keep information close to the vest if it's an ongoing investigation. Sometimes they're just not sure. Sometimes the people aren't talking. Everyone has the right to not talk to police. Police themselves, if they're accused, they have the right to not talk to investigators, right? So it becomes difficult, and you often, the old saying is you kind of have to write around it. You write what you know, and maybe the best way to write a story like that is to write what you don't know. Say this is still not clear, A, B, C, D, and E. And there's no harm in that necessarily, because the reader might be asking, well, what about that? So if you say it and you explain why it's not yet clear, I think you best serve the reader. You don't always have the space to do it all, but
string of homicides, had a lengthy record, was a drug dealer, just a horrible human being. And you were going to bring him in that night. And that led to one of the wildest shootouts in NYPD history. And I'll let you take it from there.
Correct. So November 19th, 1986, a day that will forever go down in infamy. I was assigned to Emergency Boy 3, and we got a call to respond to the 401 Precinct Detective Squad, because they had a tip from a confidential informant that this Larry Davis, wanted for a quadruple homicide, was seen by this informant entering his sister's apartment, someone in 4-2. Larry was wanted for a quadruple, but there were other homicides he was suspected of. Yeah, he was a bad guy. He was a real bad guy. And his method to try to take over the neighborhood was just execute you. And he lined up these, whether they were drug dealers or not, I don't know, I don't care. But he lined them up and shot them, once in the head and killed them. That was his message to the community or the neighborhood, saying that this is how I play. And that evening, we loaded up. We went to the 401 precinct. We got the briefing. We were told where we were going to go and what to look for. And as we respond to the building, the rest of the team surrounded the outer perimeter. 7 officers entered the apartment. 7. Of those 7, 6 were immediately shot and wounded by Davis as we entered the apartment. I was dubbed lucky number 7 because for whatever reason, he and I were the only ones that were not hit, despite all the gunfire going back and forth. I was able to evacuate 2 of our emergency officers that were seriously wounded. Fortunately, Bronx Lebanon Hospital is right across the street. So took them there, went back, tried to get back into the fight, but Davis in the interim had made his way out of the building. And then it became a citywide manhunt. I was put out on sick leave, forced out on sick leave, psychological, because it was a shooting. And I was calling them daily, begging to get put back on full duty because I wanted to be on the task force to search for Davis. So I guess after about almost 2 weeks, they finally approved me to come back on, and I was assigned to the task force. And very, very fortunate that one of the first runs that we went out on for Davis was when he was actually captured.
Downey had this great newsletter, and the archive, I'm glad that the archive is still up so that we can go back and read about some of the things that he wrote, some of the jobs that he personally chronicled. August of 1997, there was a really bad fire. I don't know if you remember this job. You and Dennis Mojica were on this one. You know the job I'm talking about?
Building collapse.
Yes. Take me through that one.
Again, whatever it was, 2 a.m. We get a report of a collapse. We've heard that hundreds of times. Most times it was a ceiling. It might be a water leak in the bathroom on the apartment above. Sheetrock comes down, but every now and then it would turn into a legitimate collapse. So anyway, that was Flatlands Avenue, Flatlands and Flatbush. So we were coming down Utica Avenue on our way with Utica to Kings Highway to Flatbush. Very quick run, especially at that time of day. And all of a sudden we hear the first due engine, their chauffeur, transmitting a 1060 for a major collapse. And we could hear the building coming down over the radio. And that kind of wakes you up a little bit, So we pulled up, and the whole one wing of the building is actually collapsed into the street. 5th floor, it was a 5-story building, I think it was, just collapsed right into the street. And the chief is telling us that on one of the upper floors, there's a civilian that's trapped. And we went up the stairs, and when you were in the hallway of this apartment building, you had no idea anything was going on. I mean, clear as a bell, no smoke, no dust, no anything. Looked down the hallway, and sure enough, the way that the collapse had occurred, the I-beam was exposed. Everything was shifting out to the street. Very long, narrow hallway, and I can kind of make out the civilian. Turned out it was an older gentleman, 70s, maybe early 80s. They woke him up. The cops. Listen, the first 4 cops on the scene, they really did a great job evacuating that building. Then the first 2 companies showed up, and I guess everybody who was there at that moment did a great job in getting everybody out. Unfortunately, this gentleman stopped to put his shoes on. And while he was putting on his shoes, the building came down. He was trapped. I was able to work my way down the hallway across the I-beam, got to the guy, but he was pretty stuck. Was able to get a Sawzall, battery-powered Sawzall. There was a wooden bookcase. Was able to cut that away, but as you cut it away, the guy's weight, just his momentum, he started heading for Flatbush Avenue. So I was kind of like bent over the back of the couch, holding him in a very awkward position, and I just wasn't able to get any leverage to pull him back up to get him out of the building. Dennis was our boss that night. He was, at that point, he got promoted out of Rescue 2. He was a lieutenant in Rescue 1. He was working an overtime tour in Rescue 2. So, and like I said, I know Dennis from 1979, 1980 when he was in 120. And I was just like, listen, boss, I need a little help. And he was able to crawl down the hallway, lean over me, get the gentleman by under his arms, and pull him up over my head. I was able to get his feet, and then we were able to work our way out of there. But that was an interesting collapse. That was pretty good.
And they happen often, unfortunately, in New York City because they're always building something.
Whether or not it was Osama bin Laden, I don't, remember if this was the first time I actually heard his name. But we had other incidents. You had Ari Halberstam shot and killed along with 2 or 3 other students, again by a Palestinian. in 1994. In 1994, you had this Jewish community center bombed in Argentina. That put us on high alert. Don may remember this. I asked them to put, and I got the advice from somebody in the bomb squad, fill sanitation trucks with sand. We stationed them around the Israeli mission to the UN and their other properties, 2 other properties in Manhattan. And then we had the Empire State Building shooting in 1997. So, you know, the hairs on the back of my head were already, you know, raised up for the possibility of terrorism in the city. And I knew we were going to have something.
And I'll add one more. 1997, we get the letter bombs to the United Nations.
Yeah.
We also get the attempted bombing of the Atlantic Avenue subway in July of 1997.
Right. Yes.
Let's backtrack as well. 1990, where it all began, November 5th, 1990, Meir Kahane gets gunned down. The Jewish rabbi gunned down by El Said Nosser, who, as I covered in previous episodes, was later linked to this bombing. And guess who paid for his defense fund? Osama bin Laden.
There you go.
So it really began back then in 90. You know, if you want to stretch it that farther
We're getting
back.
a lot of good face-to-face information from John O'Neill. So I would sit with him. We'd have a cigar, you know, after business hours. John was terrific. John Miller was another good guy to talk to.
Oh, yeah.
He was a friend because he had been in the department. And then you had Mike McCann, the chief of security at the UN. Solid guy, and he had contacts. The Secret Service, you know, were close with us. Back in the day, we had, you know, something. And not a lot of it was actionable, but at least, you know, we could do some things. We ordered a citywide intelligence plan. You know, we estimated which were the likely targets in the city, what would we do, what do we need, et cetera, et cetera. All that started as a result of these different
I came up to the street and saw that iconic picture. When I went down, there was a couple of fire trucks. When they came up, it was you had to squeeze in between trucks to get down that street. So Ronnie stopped by the firehouse, see how everybody was doing, and we're sitting at the kitchen table, and he says, "There's a group called Al Qaeda," and he said, and you know, I guess from the military, he said, nobody wants to hear us. He said, but this is a group called Al Qaeda. And he said, what they just tried to do was knock that building over by taking its foundation out. And when this group doesn't accomplish what they want to do, they will come back and hit that same target when it's convenient for them. And sure enough, 8 years later, they hit that target. Ronnie was the only fire marshal that made it way up into the building, and he was the only fire marshal that got killed that day. And he was the one warning us about Al Qaeda 8 years
Response
prior.
like this from an EMS perspective, we start out by operating from the outside, and we're doing 2 things. First of all, we're gathering patients that are already outside, so they're there. So we're not going to go past them. We start dealing with the patients that are outside and gathering them, and then we have patients that are brought out to us by the rescue forces. So that's the firefighters and police emergency service, Port Authority, and anybody else who's bringing patients out to us. So at the outset of this incident, we were not operating deeply in these buildings. We were at the lobby level, and patients were coming to us, and we had more than we could handle just with that. It was a while before we made entry into the building, so we didn't have an immediate interaction with rescue folks except in the handoff of patients. So we weren't engaged with them initially going up into the building. We weren't doing that coordination. We were managing the patients as they came out to us.
Before I get to Chief Anemone, there is the aspect of egress that you mentioned earlier to get patients out to the nearest hospitals as soon as possible. But there's also the need, given the large magnitude of patients coming out to you, for triages. How did you go about setting up those?
Well, very interesting. So, well, first, it should be said that EMS in New York City, as probably many large city EMS agencies, have a lot of experience with this sort of mass casualty thing. And whether it's a natural disaster or a building fire or a terrorist attack or anything else that might come along. So we in New York City had years of experience using the incident command system, which we piloted at Third Service Agency Incident Command System in the mid-1980s. And so we had been using that for a while. And we had a lot of practice in terms of organizing these large responses. Every year we did major events like the New York City Marathon, where we treated, depending on the weather, could be hundreds of patients at a time in a day event. So our troops and certainly our officers, our supervisors, had a lot of experience in organizing this kind of response and managing it. That said, we had never had anything like this, and I think none of us had ever had anything like this event. But we had the groundwork laid for responding to a big event. And in fact, it's interesting, as I was reflecting on 93, preparing for this, I thought of how that was a great preparation for 2001, Act Two.
It was Salome, not Ramsey Yosef. It was Salome.
Muhammad Salome.
Right, who rented the van and drove it. He was told, you go to the airport, you'll get on a plane, you fly back to Antwerp. Well, you'll fly to Antwerp, Belgium, where somebody will meet you and give you another passport and ID, and give you a ticket to fly back to Egypt, and you'll disappear in the lower valley of Egypt, with his cohorts. That was the plan. But he was $400 short because the bad guys on the other end, they ordered him the cheapest possible ticket you can get, which is for that of a child. It's almost comical. So he realizes he's $400 short. He can't go back to the mosque. He can't go back to any of the apartments or the safe houses. Everybody's on their own, trying to get out of the country. So he remembers, I got this receipt. I'm going to go back and I'm going to report it stolen, and that's how I'm going to get my money, and I'm going to the airport. So the way things were back in the day, he goes to the Ryder rental van company where he rented it in Jersey, and there's a sharp young college guy there, and he notifies the police, the FBI, and they send a team over there immediately. They tell him, we'll be glad to give you the money, but you have to go to the local police department and you have to file a missing stolen vehicle report. So he goes to the Jersey City Police, and he's like, I'm in a hurry, this, that. Listen, sit your butt over there and be quiet, and you're like number 12. You wait your turn. Meanwhile, the Joint Terrorist Task Force went there. They interviewed the fellow from the rental agency, and they put cameras and listening devices in. He comes back, and he's got the paperwork, and they go through this whole litany. Are you Muhammad Salome? Did you rent this van? Blah, 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 blah. And they got him. They got him cold. But now nobody's going to collar him, because remember, back in that moment, we wanted to see where he was going to go. He was going to hook up with, other people that were known or unknown. So they were going to do surveillance on him. Half a block away, Eyewitness News with a news crew with the microwave antenna going up. They're broadcasting live. They were monitoring the task force's radio frequencies. And they're saying, we have a suspect in the case, a terrorist, and the FBI Joint Terrorist Task Force with New York City detectives are about to make an arrest. And everybody was like, oh my God, can't believe this. So he comes walking out, and there's the news crew filming. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up. So they had to collar him on the spot. And that's the reason he went back.
I know that day, the marshals, everybody was really caught off guard by it. But where were you? And take me through your steps getting down there. And while you do that, I'll show some pictures that you sent me of what you captured.
Well, my wife actually tried to talk me out of going to work that day because it's my birthday. Mm-hmm. And I said, I got to go to work. I have something to do with Bobby Burns. I have things to do. So I usually leave early for work, and I got there and checking my cameras as I usually do, batteries, things like that. And somebody said a small plane hit the Trade Center. And I went to the front of the building because we could see the Trade Center. We overlooked the Navy Yard. I go to the front and I said, it's not a little plane. If we can see the opening from here, And then as we were watching it, the second plane hit the building. And Bobby Burns is calling me, let's go, we got to go, get your cameras, get your stuff. And we went up over the bridge, onto the FDR. We came out in front of right out of the tunnel and onto West Street, and we parked in front of the club, and we walked up the street, and there was bodies and plane parts all over the street. And as we got up to Liberty Street and the overpass, Bob says, "Run, run!" And we heard this horrific noise. Sounded like a freight train coming. And I'm a big guy. I don't run fast. I just laid down on the ground and pulled my coat up like the old timers told me. My friend, God bless him, Bob Beckwith, he said, in the old days, if you pull your coat up over your nose, and you can have some air to breathe. So that's what I did, and I just stayed there until I couldn't even see. You could not even see your hand up in front of your face until it cleared.
Was fixing some things in this room where all these snakes were. And he fell on the drill and it drilled in his head. So his brother came home and backed the drill out and called the police. So Ron went in to see, what else they needed. And there's all these tanks. So Ron comes out and he's like shaking his head. If you know Ron, I'm like, what's the problem? He said, they got a few snakes here. And I'm like, what's a few? And we went in and there were literally, I didn't know it at the time, but there were literally anacondas, all kind of venomous snakes, and they were of various sizes. And this gentleman had built a whole like wall where he had these huge cases that to hold them, to keep them in their cages, I guess. But they were huge, so the animals had a lot of freedom. So I go up and I said, we can't just take these snakes out. And trust me, I'm scared to death. I'm not ashamed to tell you that. I'm scared to death because these are huge, huge snakes. And I know there's no one working but us. So we called for another truck. Truck 7 came over to help us. So I went up to the truck. I was the chauffeur, and I called Rodney on the phone. I said, Rod, listen, we have a bunch of snakes. I said, these are really big snakes. And, we're going to need, once we get them, or whoever you call, we need someone to come and, house these snakes. And he said to me, Manny, stop with the big snakes. These aren't big snakes, And he laughed at me. So I said, because we've known each other so long, I said, you know what? All right, that's okay. I said, I'll wait till you get here. So he comes right over and he goes in the back where the dead guy is, and the snakes are all around. And he says he's not saying anything. He's just like shaking his head and looking around. So I said to him, "Oh, are these little snakes? What do you think? Which one are you going to get out first?" So that was always like a little bit of a joke between I, and Ron. There was a 8-4 guy there, and then two other people, and there were 13 snakes, huge snakes. The biggest one was 19 and a half feet, and the girth, I mean, we held him, and he was literally the muscle in his snake was just pushing us back and forth until we could get them. And we were fortunate enough to get someone from the Center for Animal Care and Control. And this was on the midnight. And he was able, Wes was able to come over and help us and guide us. But we worked the rest of that night until dawn.
In one case in particular, up in Highbridge, right near Yankee Stadium, it was like Shakespeare Avenue. I got a warrant, as a D warrant, which is the lowest felony warrant we could have for grand larceny auto. I knock on the door, and it's a railroad apartment, and a guy is wearing jets and pajama bottoms, and he starts running through the apartment. He runs to the back. Me and my partner are in chase in pursuit, and my partner, his name was John. We called him Fred because he was the spitting image of Fred Flintstone. I mean, they definitely should have casted him instead of John Goodman because he was Fred Flintstone. Looked like him, talked like him, walked like him, big old guy. So the guy goes out the window. He said, "We're on the second floor." There's a big knoll outside the window, big hill. So I go out the window. I was young, I was in shape, I was Superman. Can't hurt me. I go out the window, I'm chasing him. I end up catching up with the guy. Dude, we're here because of a warrant. The night before, he shot and killed somebody. We found the gun in the apartment. We didn't know. We're there knocking on the door, right? He goes, "Oh, darn," out the window. So John finally gets down there, huffing and puffing. I thought I was going to have to give him CPR. Like, dude, you got to lose some weight. Stop smoking. So, it turns out the night before he shot someone. And we're there with our hands in our pockets. Yo say muchacho? We're there because he stole a car a year ago and never went back to court. So, to your point, you never knew what you were getting into. You didn't know the layout of the building, especially if you're in another borough. We knew the Bronx pretty well. We knew it very well.
Right.
And so it was extraordinarily dangerous.
So Kenny Winkler's the guy that's organizing the teams, and he's sending different guys. I think it was a sergeant with 4 or 5 cops, and they would go into each tower. It's different stairwells because for those of you that may not recall, the makeup of the World Trade Center is not just one big stairwell. It's such a big complex that there were multiple stairwells in the same tower. So you'd have stairwell A, stairwell B, stairwell C, and different guys, different teams would attack each stairwell to, as you just said, assist with the evacuation. So I know you were eventually with Lieutenant John Murphy, but as far as the team that Kenny put you with, what was that team?
The team was made up of guys from 4 Truck and 3 with me and Mike. And Murph was from the South, but he'd come up that day. And we saw Kenny. Kenny just got off of work. He was a midnight guy. He was from 1 Truck. And he was in an issue T-shirt and shorts. And I believe he was wearing a red helmet, a red rope climbing helmet.
Yeah.
And those guys, come over here to this mobilization point. This is where we're putting you guys into teams. And by the time we'd already got tacked up and we started making our way over there, the second plane had struck. And we knew we were under attack at that point in time. So the North Tower was struck, and it was on fire. So we headed over to Kenny, and he goes, "Okay, where's your boss?" I'm like, "We have no boss. It's Adam 3, Adam 4, and I think Boy 4. We were all together. It was 4 Truck guys and 3. I was comfortable working with them. We flew back and forth many times, either 3 Truck, 4 Truck, and I knew all the guys that were there. I trusted them with my life. And once Lieutenant Murphy came on the scene, Kenny put us into a team. We were team number 5. And then he goes, "Yeah, you guys, I've got 2 teams in the South Tower, 2 teams in the North Tower. Take a tower that you want to go and just, go in there and do good." And that's when we started heading in. My then girlfriend, now my wife, she had worked for Morgan Stanley, and she was just moved from the South Tower. Want to go North Tower to South Tower? And had I made that decision, I would have said, "Hey, let's go to the South Tower to look for my girlfriend." We would have been, ultimately lost because the South Tower, as everybody knows, is the one that fell first. But we wound up going to the North Tower because A, we had a lot of heavy equipment with us, and B, it was a lot closer. We had to dodge a lot of the bodies that were jumping, a lot of the people that were jumping down. We said, this one's a lot closer. We don't have to go through the concourse. Why don't we just go to the North Tower? And that's what our target was. We were starting to head to the North Tower.
As the ESU stacks are there, at this time we had already thrown in the food. I'm off to the, if you're looking at the video, it'll be to the house to the right. They sent the girl down, and he was on the phone. Me, Texas on the phone. Me, we don't trust you. You're going to make a rush. So you know what? We're sending the girl down to get the food, because his mentality is, we're not going to charge and hurt the other female hostage, and it gives them kind of like a barrier between them and the police. So, like I said, immediately I'm like in the ESU, like, hold it, guys, the hostage is coming down to get the food. Like, and again, consummate professionals, these guys. I mean, the poise to be out there for that duration, and it was freezing that night. She winds up making a run for it into ESU's arms, and literally they hand her. And I've never, Mike, watching it on a training video is one thing. Watching it in real life is something completely different. I give a lot of hat. My hat goes off to these guys. They literally, I want to say rolled, but I'm being figuratively, down the stack to the right into another guy's arms, and literally they shielded her and walked up behind the Bearcat and up the block so she could be seen by EMS. And at that point, Tex lost his mind. I'm like, big guy, she ran out. What do you want me to do? Like, you sit down there. He hangs up the phone. Now, ESU's like, all right, there's only the two bad guys in there, and they're still being calm. They're still being patient and tactical. I'm trying to call him back. And it was about 13, 14 times he wouldn't answer. But by this time, I had walked back. We spoke to her. I think it was John Bartlett, a negotiator, and a 106 squad guy interviewed her, kind of gave us the layout of what was going on. By this time, his wife's there. I started speaking to her. She was already vetted by the 106 and other negotiators. And she was recovered from cancer and then went to remission. And she's here at like 1 a.m. And I explained the severity of what was going on. Like, I'm a no punch. I'm not going to hold anything back, but I'm like, if you don't want to do this, you don't have to do this. Like, but I need a peaceful resolution to this incident. And right now, you could be that potential. And what we're taught, like other negotiators, how to coach, have a list of questions, guide her. I actually have a speakerphone on my job cell. And we were, with her help, we were able to get Tex to surrender. The biggest thing, though, is he wanted her to go to the house. I'm like, yeah, that's not happening. But I'll tell you what, I've been straight with you. And this is, again, Mike, after 14 calls, we finally got through. I had to talk him down. I'm like, yo, your wife's here. And it was like, zoop. What? I'm like, she's right here. Her name is such and such. She lives at such and such. This is her phone number. She's here right now. You didn't tell me there was cancer. She had cancer. And like, he was like, all right, she's there. I'm like, but there are rules that we're going to play by. And that's how I kind of like tactically took the scene back. And he got on the phone with her. But then he was like trying to be a tough guy. And, you know, I'll just shoot it out with these guys. Like he was saying some wild stuff where she freaked out, cried, and ran out at the age of 8. That was true. So I hung up the phone. He called back. I hung up the phone again. Called back a third time, except to 911, and it went to Lutricia's phone. So Mike comes in. I go, Mike, give me the phone. Hung up the phone again. Now, in a negotiation, I will tell you this. I was comfortable enough for 5.5 hours that this guy was, but I wanted to make that initiated contact on my terms. Plus, I had to calm this woman down. So after she was calmed down, and after she agreed to come back in for round 2, I call him. And the minute he gets on the phone, I said, listen, you have one more shot with me. And I'm like, your wife will get back on the phone with you, but we are not doing any wild-based scenarios, or I'm going to have her go home. Can I apologize to her? And if I can get a cigarette and water, I'll come out. I said, okay. She gets on the phone with him. Mike It was like watching my grandmother scold me. And I'm like, no, 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 no. I'm trying to tell her to calm down. She's going in on him a little bit to a degree. And we got a pack of cigarettes. I got 2 cigarettes. I got 2 bottles of water. Lieutenant Tamara and I go down. And I go, all right, listen, they're going to come out. So like Patricia is letting the issue know. So we throw the water in the cigarettes. I'm on the phone with him. He goes, all right. And then we begin the surrender aspect. And his biggest fear was he didn't want to get shot or die by police. So I told him, I go, if you have any type of weapons, throw them in the back bedroom, in a closet, in a bathtub, out a window. But if you do it, let me know you're doing it so I don't freak out any of, the other cops that are out here. And I want you to put the phone on speaker, have it in your right hand with your palms facing out, and you're going to walk down holding the phone. And I'm telling Issue's like right next to me. I want you to come down the stairs, but you're going to come to my voice. And at some point, another voice is going to take over. I'm still going to be here, but you're going to listen to him because that was the issue guy on the door. And we had them come down, and both of them came out, Mr. Wilson and Mr. Ortiz. And as he's getting closer, and again, when I tell you ESU, I cannot thank these guys enough, the professionalism. I mean, these guys are rock stars. Just like I said, the doorman, the guy on the door with the shield, like, all right, let me see your hands. I'm like, he has a cell phone. The only thing that should be in his hand. And he goes, no, I see the cell phone. They have him lit up with the flashlights. Come, turn around, cuff, cuff. Gingerly walk them down. Next guy come, cuff, cuff. Gingerly walk him down. Now I'm halfway up the block. And I asked the ESU inspector, I go, listen, in the unlikely event this guy gets out again, I do want to hold water with this guy. And Lieutenant Tameo was excellent in providing this. So the video you saw with the hug, that wasn't the media. That was actually Commissioner John Miller. Shout out to Commissioner Miller. He was there that night. He provided a lot of the video that the news was able to obtain. And he was also there watching this entire negotiation go down, a large portion of it. And we were able to create a wall of ESU cops and detectives from hostage and walk them up the line. We allowed the hug. The 106 in Queens robbery was there. And then, all right, you're going to go to the detective squad now. These guys are going to want to talk to you. We'll take care of your wife. And that was the end of the job at like 1:30 in the morning. And he actually thanked me. Yeah, that part, I'm like, listen, you're not going to, like, I'm talking to him. I'm like, you're not going to try nothing stupid. I kept my bargain. Look at my face. I'm the guy you're talking to. She's here. You're going to get a hug. And you're not going to give any of these guys a hard time. He goes, nope, thank you. He goes, thank you for everything you did. And he was a gentleman about it. And off to the one.
Everybody was like, so what do you think? And I was sort of like, come on, like I was enjoying my sort of hangout, like figure my life out kind of time. And I came home and I told my husband, I said, oh, these guys all called me and they really want me to take this job. And I was like, you know what? I don't know. And then I kind of paused and I was like, what am I, an idiot? Like, of course I'm going to take this job. I mean, it was like a no-brainer, I had sort of joked when I went to grad school I went to get my master's in public administration. And even when I was in grad school, I said to people who asked me, why are you in grad school? And I was like, well, I don't really want to be like 50 something standing on a street corner telling people that it's snowing. Like that just seems like something that I would outgrow. Do I love reporting? Of course, but like just what the trajectory was. And I was like, I know if I want to, I'm always interested in city government. I love the fire department. I don't know if I want to do anything of any, substance, I'll have to have a managerial master's anyway. So I was like, I'll probably just, and I said it like a million times. I was like, I'll probably just go work for the fire department, whatever. And I just kind of blew it off. And then there was like on a platter and I was like, and so it was sort of serendipitous, but also just kind of amazing that it worked out the way that it did, because it is in many ways a very natural extension for the kind of stuff I was doing before, because I was so connected. There was really very little transition for me because I already speak the language. I already know, I have enough institutional knowledge from my coverage from New York One. And also just like, my brother is still active. I have many friends who are still active. Several of my girlfriends are married to firefighters. And it's just, I hate to say like, it's just been easy, but it's just been easy. And I feel like that's a blessing because I enjoy it. And and it's fun and it really doesn't feel like work. And I wasn't fully confident that would happen again, because I'd always had that kind of career at New York One where it didn't feel like work. It just was like kind of fun. And this is kind of an extension of that. And I feel really grateful for that. So it's been a good fit.
President of a bank. And she's like, nah, he loves you. He thinks you're funny. And I'm like, I can't call him. I don't know. I'll think about it. Maybe I'll call Dennis. So I go in that day and I'm going to have to run a TAC meeting. So I'm going to have ESU there because they're going to do the entry. Regular narcotics, SNU is like junior narcotics, right? Regular narcotics going to be there. I got my SNU guys. Patrol is going to be there, of course, to help us. And Inspector Smoker, who's the great guy, who's the precinct commander, comes to me and goes, Jerry, the Police Foundation has a couple of fat cats with me today. It's commanding officer for a day. I have to show them around. I'm going to have them come and sit in on the TAC meeting, but I'm not going to bring them out to the entry. I go, yeah, no problem, Inspector. So I'm doing this TAC meeting, and I look in the back of the room, and there is Dennis's dad. And I thought I was hallucinating. I swear to God. So after the meeting, I come up, I say hello to him, and he goes, Jerry, that was great, blah, blah, blah. He's like really positive. And I tell him, I go, Madeline and I were talking about you this morning. I was having coffee. He goes, why? I go, I'm buying a house, and I'm not sure if the bank's doing the right thing. He gives me his card. He says, call my secretary, writes her name on the back of the card. And he looks at me and goes, you're getting your mortgage from my bank. And I did. And everything went real smooth. When the president of the bank is looking out after you, there's like no problems, right? No hiccups.
Smooth sailing.
So that's not the end of that story, though. There was a girl in the apartment, and she was definitely a user. She was definitely down on her luck. We arrested her because there were a lot of drugs in the apartment. And she kind of pulled on the heartstrings of me and the team. I'm going to throw out the names of the team. It was Rocky Patelli, Pat Ferguson, Luigi Olinto, Mike Gargan, and myself. And so I go to the guys, I go, look, when you go downtown, talk to the district attorney and see. Manhattan District Attorney's Office has a lot of money because of all the Wall Street cases they do. They kind of like, the ADA kind of like has sympathy for her too, and they put her in a rehab program. And like for 60 days, that's a lot of money. And she gets out and she gets released, contemplating dismissal. She stays out of trouble for a year, and her case goes away. We ultimately got Fat Jim, locked up Fat Jim for all the felony drugs, and I don't even know what happened with his case. Like 17 years later, 18 years later, I'm sitting right where I am right now, and my phone rings. It's Texas. And this woman, I'll call her June, calls up and says, I answer the phone, Jerry Kane. She goes, are you the Sergeant Kane who used to be the SNU sergeant in Midtown North in 1987? And I go, yeah. And she goes, you might not remember me, but I am. And she tells me who she is. And I stop her. I go, I know exactly who you are. I remember exactly. Well, she tells me she got clean. She was pregnant. Her son was graduating high school that year, a year early. He was an Eagle Scout, and he was going into the Navy to become an air traffic controller. She was a volunteer EMT. She owned a swimming school, and she donated swimming school lessons to kids with autism because she lives in a state with a gazillion swimming pools, and these autistic kids need to know how to swim because they could fall into a pool at any time. So she turned her life 180 degrees around. She had a great, great kid. And so her and the kid came up before he went to boot camp, and I got the whole team back together. We were all retired. Actually, two guys were still on the job. And we went out for a big steak and had a lot of laughs, and we stay in touch now. And who gets to retire and then hear from someone you arrested almost 2 decades ago that you saved their life and saved their unborn child's life, and that they're both living their best life now? So it's not all death and sadness and misery. There are good stories out there, and that I got one, and that makes me a lucky
us to the summer of 1998. You were in Rescue 1 by this point for about a year, and we have, there's a lot of construction in New York City. There always is. There always will be. We have a 40-foot crane that falls in Manhattan. And these things are always a hazard. If there's storms, sometimes they'll sway. Maybe a water main break destabilizes. It's always a concern because we've seen some horrendous tragedies where they collapse, they take out a block, and more tragically, they injure, if not kill people. And in this collapse, you're talking about a wide array of damage in such a compact space like Midtown. And on top of that, it's July. It's sweltering hot in the city, which doesn't make things any easier. Take me through the response to that.
We were in quarters at the time, and the box came over for a crane collapse, and we knew where the crane was operating. You know, it was right 2 blocks from the firehouse, actually. We responded. We got there right as Battalion 9 was pulling into the block. I reported into Chief Nardone at the time and just said, rescue, we're here, Chief, what can we do? He goes, take a look, size up, let me know what's going on. And he goes, so I transmitted 1060. I said, yes, definitely transmitted 1060 for, collapse rescue type of thing, getting the additional rescue company, special operations there as well. And the way it was a crane elevator going up one side of the building and the crane on top, and it separated from the building at the top end of it, went across the street, crashed into a roof of the building across the street, and the weight itself planted itself in the middle of the block about 3 or 4 feet into the ground. The first thing I saw was the separation of the elevator on the building into construction, that I knew we had to secure that. So I told my guys, grab the rigging, grab the rope, grab the grip hoist. I left one guy at the rig to make sure if we need any more equipment. We went, reported to the construction guys. I said, I need to get upstairs. They got us upstairs, sized up what we needed to tie off, and I had the guys start rigging up the hoist itself and tying it back off to the building using ropes and the grip to secure the 2 top ends of it, and getting as much as we want, as secure as we could before it fell any further. Chief Downey at the time came up and said, keep on doing what you're doing. He goes, I have other rescue companies coming in, and I believe he had the one rescue company assigned to the building across the street. Actually, there was one fatality on the top floor there where the crane came through and actually killed a woman there. So it was, they were doing a search there. We were still securing up, and then we had a couple of the other companies coming up and help us out. But it was basically for us, the rescue, just securing our end and making sure that the rest of the crane wouldn't fall into anybody else in the street or destroy any more buildings across the street.
Like I had that guy. This was one of my favorites. Where this guy, his name is Volta Rotz. He was down by Co-op City, and Co-op City had a bunch of airbags being stolen in the cars, and you had 2 police officers, anti-crime from the 45th precinct, looking around, and they saw this guy, disheveled-looking guy in the area, and they went to talk to him, and during the course of talking to him, he started lying to them, and the next thing you know, they're getting physical, and he's fighting with these guys, and he had a machine gun and a 38, bunch of knives. He had a bunch of improvised explosive devices strapped to his chest. He had a radio listening to the 4-5 frequency, and we later found out this guy was like a commando in Eastern Europe, and he basically was kicking all these guys' teeth in, all these cops, and they got lucky where while they were fighting, a guy that lived in Co-op City was coming off a city bus. He was a construction worker. He came up behind the guy and grabbed him, gave the cops enough time to call for backup. But I mean, you got more cops coming. He was tased, and he went through all this, and he basically took on a bunch of cops and fought them. And I'm not talking about pulling, struggling. I'm talking about strikes and blows. And then he was taken off to Lincoln Hospital to be treated, and he beat up the cop guarding him. And while all this is going on, I had just moved into my house. One of our guys, Mike Rooney, had retired, and they were having a party for him. Mike was a volunteer fireman in Long Island, and my wife wasn't feeling great, so I didn't go to the party. And when the call for this came in, Mark Torrey, who was the CEO of A&E, is now the CEO of the Bomb Squad. He's like, hey, I need you to go over to the 4-5 and take a look at this. Everybody out here is, at the party. They're drinking, they're partying. I can't send anybody in. And it made it sound like it was not a big deal. And when I got there, I mean, it was a monster. And I spent a long time with this guy, found that he had buried weapons and explosives in City Island. And I mean, it was a tremendous case. A lot of interesting things with this guy. He was a survivalist living on the island. I mean, when we went to his encampment, we had to take him back out there with us with the Hannibal Lecter chains on and everything. And he said, I can show you where it is on a map, but I've got tripwires and booby traps all over the place with explosives. So we had to bring in the bomb squad, and here it is. You're in the middle of City Island. It looks like you're trolling through the Vietnam forest, jungle rather, and to defuse this. And we had to have the bomb squad come in and do all this. And when we got to his camp, we found bags of fingernails, bags of clothing, bags of jewelry, women's clothing. And I'm thinking, my God, we've got a serial killer here. And we did all this going on, and and nobody wrote about it. And we sent out the stuff through the chains of command. And for whatever reason, like I said, the press picks up on it or they don't. It sounds sexy or it doesn't. Yeah, you know better than I do, but I couldn't believe something like that didn't. At that point, I was thinking I've got a serial killer with me. It ended up being it was his nails, his hair, and all the stuff that he'd find. He used to take a metal detector and go around the beach and collect stuff, and it wasn't dangerous at all. But and it's funny because once we got him medicated at the hospital, he was a normal guy again. He was fine. I actually had to have he said Ron Kuby was his lawyer, and I had to have Kevin Perret call Ron Kuby at the radio station. Say, do you know this guy? So, hey, Kevin.
There's a job that I know Mike was credited for, Sergeant Curtin, I'm referring to, of course.
Yep.
And it was a building collapse. I think it might have been in 1999, and Figiano was there too. Were you on that one?
Yeah, I think it was Lexington Avenue.
All right, tell me about that job.
They were doing construction on a building. I want to say it was a 2-3, maybe the 2-5, over that neighborhood. And I was in the truck with Mike, Sergeant Curtin, and the Atom car was out. Vidge was in the Atom car with Pete Linarillo from 6 Truck. He flew up for the day. And some sort of building collapse came over. I remember the Atom car calling to say, hey, start the truck. And we got over there, and we had gotten there, and there was a worker that was trapped under some rubble. Some big wooden beams. There weren't steel beams in this building. They were old wood timbers, and a lot of bricks. So he was covered from like his abdomen down on like kind of a slant going into the basement. So we went into there, and we got equipment that we needed, and the 4 of us actually were all in there at one point. When Mike had called me in with certain equipment as a chauffeur, and they had removed the guy and packaged him and brought him out safely. I think he had a broken pelvis, if I recall correctly, definitely a broken leg. I know he's in a lot of pain, but, it took a little while. And I think we were accompanied by the fire department, probably, most likely. But I know it was the emergency guys that packaged him up and did most of the removal.
Looking back, it was easier than I thought it would be. And it's funny because this job came up. I got a call. Again, I was the second in command of the narcotics division. I was a deputy chief for 4 or 5 years at the time. Very happy. Loved the job. Loved the department. Loved what I'm doing. Proud of being with the men and women of the NYPD. And so I get a call and they said, hey, Mayor of Yonkers is looking for a police commissioner. And of course, I thought this guy wanted me to find some people for him to interview. And the guy says, no, knucklehead, he wants to talk to you. So, and I'm not being humble. That's just how it happened. So I immediately contact, again, Pat Harnett, John Timoney. And I said, hey, because these guys are mentors to me. And I said, what do you think? I'm not looking to leave. And both of them didn't hesitate 1 second. They said, you got an opportunity to go run your own police department, go run your own police department. So that meant a lot to me that they thought they had the confidence in me that I could do this. So I went there, and some folks say, oh, you got to bring somebody with you. You got to bring, maybe not an entourage, you got to bring some key people. And, I had one fellow in mind, a good friend, retired Sergeant Lenny Lemmer. He's out there somewhere now. Hopefully he's listening. He was the only guy I thought about maybe bringing. Lenny, he checks off a lot of boxes. He's an intel guy. He's a narcotics guy. He's a good street guy. Actually, I met Lenny in 1981. My uncle got mugged, and Lenny caught the guy that mugged my uncle. And then the guy decided to resist arrest, and Lenny was happy to oblige him. But you know what? Lenny couldn't do it at the time, and so I went myself. And it served me well. I went in. I asked a lot of questions. Good people there, good solid people. You mentioned they have their own detective division. Some of the best detectives I've ever worked with anywhere are Yonkers detectives. The emergency service unit, I got them some training, got them some equipment. Again, no disrespect to the E-men in New York, but I stacked the Yonkers ESU up to them close, if not equal. Great street cops. I had 4 precincts. It's like almost like 4 different towns in Yonkers. The 3rd precinct is a busy area with a lot of crime, a lot of social ills. Great cops all over Yonkers. But the 3rd precinct is a busy place, and those cops, they handle it well. So it was a good transition. And working directly for a mayor, it reminded me of being a precinct commander in some ways. Because one thing about being a precinct commander is you can put something in place and see a tangible result the following week. And I got gratification out of that. So now on a larger scale, I could do that in Yonkers. And again, with a lot of help from a lot of good people. It wasn't all me, but we could do things. And I could do things that in the past I might say, man, I wish somebody would do something about that. Well, now I could do something about that. And then I had control of a budget as well. And I had control of personnel. I had control of everything. And you know what? I didn't realize how much I would like that. And I did 5 years there, and I loved every minute.
So July of '98 is when Engine 288 becomes Squad 288. And this is being formed, and you're a charter member. So it doesn't happen overnight. Kubler, you're off the squad. There's a process. Take me through the process of getting into SOC when you first heard they were going to form it.
Well, at that time, you go. They posted something in the orders, and there was a tryout. They wanted you to go out down there to the Rock, and the captains of the new squads were basically standing around with a clipboard, and they were running you through different evolutions, climbing the aerial, stretching a line. I can't remember what they all were, but they were sitting around watching you. And it was at the end of the day, they jotted down names that they liked, and they all sat at a big table, and it was like choosing up your baseball team. They went around a circle. I'm going to take this guy. I'm going to take this guy. They also had their picks. There was guys like Hank Millay, senior guy. He didn't try it out. There was other guys who they brought over. They had a couple of guys that they could bring over, and then they picked from the younger guys. And also, 288, I think we only had one guy that stayed from the original Engine 288. But there was other guys like in 270. They may have had like 6, 7, 8 guys, Squad 8, Engine 18, 6, 7, 8 guys that wanted to stay. They offered it to the guys who were there first. And if they wanted to stay, they could stay. But in 288, there was really only one guy that stayed, Anthony Tito. And the rest of the guys were all new guys. So that brings up two different things there. So you have the old engine, let's say 18, because they had more guys. You had the old guys from Engine 18 who more or less would say, well, this is Engine 18. This is how we do it. You got all these new hard chargers coming in like, yo, Jack, this ain't Engine 18. This is Squad 18. And this is how we're going to do it. And that created a lot of animosity, man, a lot of rifts. I know a lot of those guys were eventually weeded out because there's a lot of button heads going on. For us, we really didn't have that, man. We all came in. We were all on the same page. All just wanted to go to work. All couldn't wait. Drilled to 3 o'clock in the morning. We knew what we were signing up for. And basically, that's what we went there for. It was a different mishmash of guys. But I tell this story all the time. So I didn't get picked. When I went down there, Nicky Corrado got picked. A couple other guys got picked. So Louis, about to go there, and he says, "Why don't you come down and see the captain? Talk to him, see what he says." So I said, "I'll go down there." I go down, see the captain. He's like, "Kev, you know what? I'll keep your name around. I have a lot of young guys. I really don't need another guy with 3, 4 years on the job. I got a lot of those guys. I said, "Okay, keep me in mind, Cap." So when I came back, the captain of 16 truck was a guy named Mike Puzzaferi. He was my workout partner. He was a hard charger. He was a great fireman up in Vinegar Hill, a lieutenant in Vinegar Hill. He says, "So what happened?" And I used to like working with him because he knew I liked to drill all the time. So he says, "What happened?" I says, the captain said he got a lot of young guys. I said, "All right." He says, "Do you really want to go there?" I go, "Yeah, I do, but I can wait my turn." I think 2 days later, he must. I don't know who he called. 2 days later, Captain Murphy calls me back. He goes, "Hey, Kev, I got a call on your behalf. You want to come down and start on Saturday?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "All right, come in and see me tomorrow and fill out the paperwork." I was like, "Yeah, Cap, I was in there like 2 days ago." He goes, "Oh, that was you? All right, start on Saturday." So I said, I must have left a really good impression on him, man. He didn't even remember that I went to see him 2 days before. But that's basically how I got over there, man. And I think Louis worked the very first day, and I came there like the second or third day.
My one happy story down there, though, is in February in the middle of February, just around this time, we had there was a single beam in the southeast quadrant of the pit standing over there, and all of a sudden I see like these two Port Authority cops going like in this scissor jack basket, and they're raising the basket up and everything like that, and they whip out a stencil and they start spray painting PAPD 37. So I'm like, yo, listen, yo, whistling up to the guys, and they lower the basket down and everything like that. So I'm like, I want to go up there with you guys. So they're like, yeah, come on in. So I jump in the basket, back up we go. They finish painting theirs. So they're like, and the guys down in the thing are like, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna put on there? Like, if somebody yells out ESU 14, I'm like, I knew that was not gonna happen. I was like, there was 23 of us lost. So I start freehand NYPD, and the D, I just missed the edge of the beam for the D, but I get it in there and I kind of clean it up just enough, and then I do the 20 with the 2, and I stop for a second, and I'm like, the 3. I'm gonna do the truck 3 flat symbol, and I spray paint the 3 of the 20 for the 3 that eventually we found out we had lost 3 from 3 truck. We thought it was more. We had not known who else, so on and so forth was, so as far as that, we just knew that we had lost the 23 that day, and I was like, I'm doing
that was you that put that on there.
I spray painted the NYPD 23 up on it.
I have been to the museum. I went with my family back in 2016, and I saw that beam. It has FDNY 343 on it.
Yeah.
And
that
I
was
didn't know you did that.
That made up for like everything that bad that I've experienced. That was one of my proudest moments, because I know even though we lost 14 superstar guys, but no, we lost 23 talented police officers, detectives, sergeants. Like, and I was never ever gonna be a thought in my mind to just put us over them, because it was the job. For me, it was the job representing what we all did down there.
Wally introduced me to a guy big guy named, oh God. Well, he had dope also, and he was a Confederate of Nicky as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we consummated a half kilo with him in the garage, in Nicky's garage. This was a nice scene. I get to the place, they know I'm coming, all right? The front of the entrance has lined up with at least 8 black big men. It looked like the front line for the Giants defense team, all right? So I say, all right, here it goes, Louis. I started thinking to myself, this is it, So I'm thinking of my kids, I'm thinking of my wife. I get out of the car, and my legs feel like mud, like I'm walking in mud, So finally I get close to them. Boom! They open up like the sea, like the Red Sea. I go through, I felt, ooh, wow, that was great, man. I felt so good after that. Walked in. I met this fella, what was his name, man? Anyway, he directs me to a car. He says the dope is there. That's the first time I saw the dope and gave the money after. Gave the money to him after. That was Wally's car, was a Corvette. Wally loved cars. I drove out in the Corvette. We met at a predestined location. That was that. There's a lot of nice things that went down with this too, by the way. But I wasn't supposed to do that deal. And I got authorization in a left-handed way, but I won't go into that right now. So we did that. Then there came a time when we negotiated for another 5 kilos. And this was it. This was the end of it because DA could not come up with any more money. No more money. No more deals. I said, holy Mac, we had a great case going. We could do a lot more, you know. So I got into a little rough, a little, how you say, a little altercation with them, but I worked it out. So we met at a predestined location. I was in a van, and the deal was that if the guy didn't come, then we arrest him. And I would have to indicate that to them by opening the door to the van. So while he comes back to me, he says, Louis, the guy ain't there. So I open the door, they all flock down, and we take him down. That was it.
Down the Trade Center. What was the plan of attack for you and your crew? You know, what was the size up process like? What were you telling the guys?
Well, we got the order. We went on the third alarm, and we got down there, and the building was burning, and basically it was going to be a standard operating procedure. In my head, we had to get to the seat of the fire and put the fire out. It was no different than any other job. It wasn't like we were at something spectacular. It turned into a spectacular event, of course, with the collapse of the building. But that's when we arrived there. It was another burning building. Just happened to be, of course, famous buildings, well-known buildings. But they were burning. There were fires in the buildings, and we had to put those fires out. And that was what's going on in my head. You know?
Which stairwell? Well, you ended up taking stairwell B primarily, but I know at some point when the other one came down, South Tower came down, it was a combination of Chief Gansey, the chief of the department, and Chief Joe Pfeiffer, who later went on to run the FDNY's counterterrorism division when it was insulated to the department in 2002, I believe, that issued the Mayday order to evacuate the building. I'm assuming that at that point, you guys heard that order and began the descent down, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
That is correct. We got the order Mayday to evacuate the building, and we started down. Exactly. That's what you do. You follow orders, you know.
Of course. On the way down, some guys, I remember a couple of guys from ESU talking about this, that, you know, the stairwell they were in by that point, they were able to make a rapid descent down because there was nobody in it that was coming down to evacuate. So they got out with more than enough time, given they were the only ones in the stairwell. Other stairwells were a bit more crowded. Guys were meeting resistance on the way up and then on the way back down because of the amount of people coming down and that they had to get out of there. For you, was your stairwell crowded, or did you have, at least until 1028, a relatively clear shot down?
No, I don't remember there were being crowded. There were a number of civilians in the stairway coming down with us, but I don't. In fact, one of the people coming down, Josephine, actually got stuck with us from the
Josephine Harris.
Yeah, Josephine. Yeah, so there were civilians there, but there weren't that many of them. I think most of them had already gotten out of the building. Thank God.
So when 9:59 a.m. to just go back to that for a second, when the other building came down, I mean, you felt the rumble. I'm sure who wouldn't if they were in your position. Did you know right away what that was, given your 25 years of experience at that point?
No, I didn't know exactly what it was. What I thought at first, when the stairway started rumbling, I thought the building we were in was starting to come down. I thought there was maybe a partial collapse or something. Something was going on. I didn't know the other building had come down. I just found it later, of course. But my very first thought was there was something occurring in the building I was in, because that's how it was a strong shake. It wasn't just a little rumble; it was a pretty strong shake. Well, we'll let tonnage coming down. Of course, it's going to shake the ground that way. But I did not know it was South Tower coming down. No, I found that out later.
So at 10:28, as you and the guys, Chief Jay Jonas and his team, are on the way back down. He wasn't chief at the time, of course. I believe he was a lieutenant or a captain, actually, captain.
Yeah, he was captain. time. I think so.
Yeah, but he was a captain at the time. The building comes down, and as I said before, and I'll link it in the description of this video when it goes on YouTube. Dennis Smith's documentary, 2002's report from Ground Zero, and particularly the part where you talk about your survival. You're in stairwell B. You survive this collapse amazingly, and then there's that process in which these guys are trying to figure out first where you guys are because of the magnitude of the devastation, and then the work subsequently to get you and your men, and of course Chief Jonas's men, as well as Josephine Harris, out of there. During that process, as they worked to look for you, take me through just trying not to panic as you're in this confined space and unsure if you are going to be rescued.
Well, I was, for a while, I was alone, totally alone. I was on the fourth or fifth floor, and there was nobody around me, and I didn't hear anything. I thought I was totally alone, which is the frightening experience when you feel totally alone. And then after about 15 minutes or so, I heard voices. And there were other people in that stairway, and I heard their voices. And believe me, that was a calming effect on me. The fact that there were other people there, other human beings. Being alone is a terribly frightening thing, You're going through something bad and you have comrades. For some reason, that brings you the comfort. I can't explain that. I'm not a psychologist, psychiatrist, but for some reason, the aloneness is a terrifying feeling, You feel there's nobody around, but when you find out there's other people around, for some reason that calms you down. It makes you feel a little better.
Well, nobody wants to go through plight or stressful situations in solitude. It's not the best way to handle those situations, and especially a situation like that. Of course, you'd like to have solitude.
They call it solitary confining when they punish a prisoner, right?
Exactly.
It's very frightening being alone. It really is. It's a whole different type of fear, even though the situation is so dangerous around you. But when you're alone, that is
You got to A&E in March of '97. You almost got tested. No, not almost. You did get tested right away, because 4 months later is when Paul and Richie have that job out in Brooklyn, where they get a call in the middle of the night. They go out there. Eddie Hayes was out there too, who'll be on the show this Friday. And, ESU does the raid, and they find these guys with the pipe bombs, and Paul and Richie render them safe. Now, I never got the A&E side of it. And here you are, a brand spanking new sergeant, not on the job, but in that unit, when these two guys stop what would have been the nation's first suicide bombing. What was A&E's role in the Brooklyn job back in '97?
Okay, so I can tell you, when you get tested like this, so Jerry Sheen just started vacation, and so did John Santos. They were both out of the office. And so
wow,
I was the only supervisor working. What happened was I get a phone call from the wheel. What happened? The perps were already at Kings County Hospital, and I had 4 detectives, so I sent 3 detectives to the scene, and then 1 detective to Kings County to meet me. I wanted to see if I could talk to these guys. And there was a night watch detective watching them in the emergency room. By the time I got there, 1 was already up in the operating suite, and the other one was being prepped to go up to the operating suite. And when you say, some of your funny moments on the job, well, I'm asking the detective, is there anything? He says, all he kept on asking for what time it was. He wanted to know what time. He must have asked it 100 times. So I'm thinking in my head, there may be another device out there on a timer, or another team, another cell that was going to go do something also. This could be a coordinated thing. So I get that information back to where it needed to go. I knew right away that really, more than likely, this wasn't going to be an A&E case, that this was going to go to the Joint Terrorist Task Force, because they were in our division at the time. They were in our division as well. They were a sister squad. So a lot of times, jobs like this, we both are there. working the case together, so they say, because you got the feds involved. And then all of a sudden they'll make a decision which way it's going to go. And wherever the chips lie, you're stuck with what's ever in the paper there, you know. So as I'm trying to question this guy, a young doctor, you know, probably a resident, was telling me that I couldn't question the patient, that she's there to save a life. And I says, well, so am I. I says, I am. And I want you to keep him alive. As long as it takes for him to tell me what's so important about 9 o'clock. He's asking if it's 9 o'clock. And our argument got a little vocal. And there was an old-time nurse there who saw what was going on, and she grabbed this young doctor and spirited her away and said, we need you over here. This patient has a severe wound. And the nurse looked over my shoulder and just gave me the nod. Like, go ahead, go and ask your questions. There was an anesthesiologist that was there that was ready to prep this guy. And he goes, in 30 seconds, you could ask him anything you want. I asked him. So these two guys actually came over. They were from, they were part of Hamas.
Yeah, they're Palestine guys.
Yeah, they were Palestinians. They just got there. One of the things I guess one of the guys may have discussed was on the vest. Very fortunate for the ESU guys that went into that apartment and took them down was that they put 4 safety switches on the vest.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy's hand, when it swiped down, because he tried to actually detonate it, his hand came down and only 2 of the toggles were hit. If the other 2 would have been hit also, the bomb would have went off and killed everyone in that
bomber
room.
in the subway, an attempted bomber in the subway, in which he had, I believe you told me, and we'll dive into it right now, 2 bombs on him. One went off, and I think that one killed him. But one was still alive, and here he is, a corpse with the live bomb on it. Tell us about that one.
Yeah, 1988, we got a call to go up to 125th Street and 3rd Avenue, which was the subway system. Apparently, prior to our arrival, there was an explosion, and when they went over to where it was, there was a man down, and he was on fire, and his chest had exploded on one side. But he had another device on his other side. He had the stereo wires and everything else. So when we got there, Phil Brown was the other bomb tech that I was working with that day. We couldn't use the robot. We couldn't get the robot into the situation. So we had to do what it's called a hand entry. So we had to go in there, even though one side of him had been blown away and he was dead, there was still another pipe bomb on the other side that had to be diffused because it didn't go off when the other one went off. So you have a hang fire and you don't know why it caused that. So we had to go in and we had to trace the wires according to where it was and had to figure out where it was the center of the battery operated situation. And then we had to diffuse it based on that. And that's how we were able to diffuse it. That man was never identified. Interpol and everybody else had no recollection of who he was. He was a young man, approximately 35 years old. Must have caused the explosion because he had the device on him and he had the speaker wires on his wrist. And I think the way it was supposed to go was he was supposed to hug somebody and cause the wires to complete the circuit and kill him and the person that he was hugging. And he must have came down the subway platform and he hit the stairs and he must have, one of the wires must have hit the metal on the stairwell and that caused it to explode. And that's what caused him to die right then and there. But one of them went off and one of them didn't. So we had to diffuse that.
Keep the window down, but they'd have the heater on if it was the winter. They'd do other things to make sure they had their ear to the radio, yes, but also their ear to the street to pick up on something that might not have come over the radio yet. So for you, what were your tricks to making sure that you stayed alert and maybe made some great collars before the jobs even got called in?
Well, we came on during the crack pandemic.
when I was in the academy, nobody told us what was going on in the streets. We were in the academy, and none of our instructors, nobody said what was going on. We didn't know what we were being thrown into. And you learn the job real fast. You have to. You just learn certain tricks, you know. And I got a good story, and I just got lucky. You know, I was working in 7-2. It was 1988. Stabbing comes over at a crack den. Multiple people stabbed. I'm with my partner, and we're flying there. Now there's like 7 or 8 cars going to this call because it's a stabbing, so it's a job in progress. It's a violent crime. So I just told my partner, I'm like, you know, if you were a perp, where would you go? Wouldn't you want to be like off the street and go on the ground? Go to the train station by Firehouse. I just want to check the station. It was like 2 blocks away from where the stabbing was. We go to the train station. I go down the steps, and there's the guy standing on a platform. 3 perps. Exact description. Standing on a platform. So I go to grab them, and they take off. We get into a big foot pursuit. I chase them into Prospect Park. We catch them, and it winds up 2 people in the stabbing passed away, and it wound up being a homicide arrest. But if I didn't think to go into the station, they would have got away. And like little stuff like that, like other cops, like when you're going to a burglary or a robbery, you gotta look at the blocks before you get there. Like when you're a block and a half away, start looking and see who's walking fast, because the robbery could have happened already and the guy's a block away. So you gotta look and see who's just got their head down, who's looking funny. A lot of times, including myself, you get tunnel vision. You go right to the address. You gotta slow down like a block before and just look around, because sometimes the perp could walk right past you.
So back in December of '90, my partner and I, driving down the street, the 8-1 was following a guy that they said had a rifle. We see him; he's walking right up towards us. We get out of the car. He drops the rifle off a shoulder sling, but then produces a handgun, and then we had a couple of shots over the hood of a car as we're chasing him, like down the street. We end up catching him, and it's really funny because you think that's back in 1990, right? When I tell the story, I give you the whole story, right? That's my wife's birthday, right? So we had celebrated my wife's birthday, went into work. 3 days later, my mother passed away. So I also broke my hand in that arrest. But as I'm at the wake, there's a call that comes into my house from guys from Long Island Railroad Police. And they're like, hey, Guy, you made this attempted murder collar, right? Shooting at the police. But we got your guy. He's on they released him by mistake. He tried to shoot us, fired numerous rounds at us. We fired at him, right? The DA's office dropped the ball and let him out by mistake. That guy left the DA's office, central booking, got an Uzi and tried to rob an Undercover on the platform of Nostrand Avenue in Atlantic. So when you hear people being released on the, all the different stuff, you're like, wow, that's crazy. That was happening. Mistakes were happening. But it was crazy. So then in 1993, after the court case goes through and everything goes through, they awarded us the Medal of Valor.
You mentioned a celebrity in Bono. I'm going to mention another popular musician at the time that you arrested one time. You were telling me this story off the air. I want to hear it on the air now. And that would be One Boy George. Tell me about what happened there.
Okay. I was on a FIST operation, which was a fugitive investigative strike team in 1984. We were based out of Hartford, Connecticut. And we had it was a really good group of guys and ladies. We had 5 teams, and we made over 450 arrests in 8 weeks. It was the most successful one. So we were at if you're familiar with Hartford, the Arch Cafe, which is a gathering place for law enforcement for the state of Connecticut, basically. And we were having a few beers as law enforcement does, and listening to Boy George and the Culture Club in the background playing in the bar. And he was coming to Hartford, and we decided maybe we should send letters out and create a new FM station that was going to be in the Hartford area, which was totally bogus. So we did that. And we sent letters out, and we had 13 people make a reservation to have breakfast and the concert with Boy George. So we went around in a limo. We got a limo and picked him up, and they were thinking they're on cloud nine, and it made the national news. And this is before cops. We videotaped it on either beta or that, just for court purposes. And they claimed false arrest and ruse, but we took them instead to the jail. So this made news on like Entertainment Tonight and the shows of the day. So the next thing, about a year later, Boy George decided to sue the Attorney General, the Department of Justice, and the 7 unknown law enforcement agents in the state of Connecticut, and filed a civil suit. And we were able to beat that because, number one, we did nothing wrong. We used a ruse to arrest people and bring them in. But Boy George started to get a checkered past with heroin use over in London. And he actually appeared as a narc on the A-Team with Mr. T. So they grabbed that and it went away. But at the time, it was a lot of fun, which you have. And these people went from happiness. One guy, it was his birthday, and he's yelling in the back of the limo, "Hey man, it's my birthday." Well, happy birthday. And then next thing you know, there's a undercover people pulling him over and arresting him. So, you know, and these were convicted felons. They were wanted for robbery and all kinds of bad deeds in the state of Connecticut.
Chameleon. That book, especially right after that ugly day and what was a brutal time for New York. Tell me about what incentivized you to write it.
Well, I knew John O'Neill before he died, and I like to think we were friends. He was for an FBI official. He was open to the media. He wouldn't leak you any secrets, but he was a helpful, charismatic guy, not a cookie cutter FBI guy. But to say what motivated me to write the story was it's a bit fortuitous. It's an interesting story, how things happen in life. I covered the police department a long time, and I covered the FBI for a long time at the same time. I mean, I wrote the first stories when they created the Joint Terrorist Task Force in like 1979. I hate to say the numbers because it seems so long ago, right? But Bernie Carrick was the police commissioner, and he was doing a biography for a woman named Judith Regan. And
The Lost Son.
Yeah, and she had her own imprint at HarperCollins. And there was a little squib in the newspapers that the head of the National Security Division for the FBI was missing in the World Trade Center. It was as simple as that. And a credit to her, she was a genius at finding great stories and turning them into great books. She did Jose Canseco's book on being juiced, which exposed the steroid era of baseball, for example. And she did Howard Stern's book, actually, way back in the day, which became a movie. But anyway, so she saw this thing about this guy missing in the World Trade Center, said, gee, there must be a book in that somehow. And she asked Bernie Carrick, who she was doing his book, does she know anybody that she should speak to? And he said, you should call Murray Weiss. He knows a lot about terrorism. He knows a lot about the FBI. He knows John O'Neill. John O'Neill is the real deal. And she rang me and 2 conversations, and I was all in, to do a book on John. And I will tell you this, doing a book on him was a task and a half because there was nothing in the public record about him. He worked in a world that was a secret world. I knew him, but I really didn't know him. I didn't know his personal life, and I certainly wasn't privy to all the things you just mentioned, all the work he had done and his career and becoming the leading expert in this country on Osama bin Laden. And little was known about bin Laden too on 2000. It wasn't like, everybody knows bin Laden. Yeah, we know his story. Not at all. And so I kind of resurrected a man's life where there wasn't anything to know. The FBI gave me one piece of paper that listed here's where he worked, here's where he worked, here's where he worked, and it was all in, initials. He worked here at HQ and he worked here and he did the VAPCON case. And anyway, so I spent a year and a half while I had a full-time job at the New York Post. And the editor of the New York Post told me, I don't want you to do this book because you're going to take your eye off my ball and I pay you like every day. So I worked twice as hard for him and I worked twice as hard on that book. And it turned into, John O'Neill had a very special place in the history of this country and in the history of 9/11. And he was both knowledgeable and a voice telling people what was going on in this world. And unfortunately, he didn't survive 9/11 because he would have been an extremely important post 9/11 official in this country, actually.
This might sound different than what everybody feels, but you could take good cops like Billy and a few, there's plenty of them out there, take cops like Billy, and you put him in a marked radio car, and he'll still come back with gun collars. He'll still come back with robbery collars because they eyeball you. And sometimes it's better to be in a radio car because sometimes you think you're on the way to a job. You don't have time for them. But I used to work with 3 radio cars, marked cars in uniform. 1 long, 1 short, and 1 in the middle. And you get them, you did like you're going to ride through the block, and then you stop, and you get out, and you got your bad guys. So you can do it in uniform, and people like Billy, aggressive guys, have done it before. You go out there and you make your gun collars and your robbery collars. Now, it's nice, the element of surprise, of course. They don't know you. But most of the bad guys out there, the mopes out there, they are good too. They can smell an anti-crime car coming through the street. Even the cabs, we had the yellow cabs,
Cabs,
and livery cabs, yeah, right, taxi cabs. So they knew. Who cared? Those are the bad guys. They're eyeballing you. They're walking with a hitch. They're dumping a gun, and they're walking away from you. Hey, guys, I just want to talk to you. Where you going, guys? Wait. Next thing you know, they're gone. They're in the wind. But we got guys down the block. Hem them in, get them, collar them up. And then you had runners run with the guys who don't have the gun. They would leave everybody on a chase and lead the cops on a decoy who wouldn't have a gun, that kind of a deal. So so many tricks of the trades. But good cops like Billy, young people like that, they smell guns. They smell bad guys. They can look at a guy and says, this guy is dirty. And you just watch him for a few seconds.
And that's the key. You got to be able to be patient. I said it before, Pete. It's like hunting and fishing. You got to be patient. You may have to watch him for a long time. Watch the adjustment, how he's carrying himself. It's it's a skill you can teach, but you've got to be out there teaching it.
It's kind of like baseball. What do you do, right? What do they tell you? Work the count. Wait for your pitch. Wait for your pitch. Don't swing at the first pitch unless it's a meatball right down the middle to go right ahead. I don't
think of it, Mike, as a melting pot either, by the way. Because melting pot as a metaphor implies that we're all sort of dumped into this cauldron and mixed together, and then that's what a New Yorker is. That really doesn't apply, in my view. I mean, obviously people will differ. I sort of agree with David Dinkins' metaphor, and that is that it's a gorgeous mosaic of New York is not a monolith. New York is a collection of neighborhoods. And reporters, correspondents, people who do what I do, need to recognize that and need to pay respect and attention to all of the constituencies of New York, because in my view, we're all New Yorkers, but we come from different places with different cultures, different ethnicities, in many cases, different languages. So as long as we recognize that, I think we understand the system.
Coming up, May 30th, 1985, a beautiful day, kind of like this one, where a crane crushes this poor woman's legs. I think Paul Raganese got credited with that rescue because he talked to her for a long time and kept her calm. And she has since passed away. She died last year at the age of 85. But getting down there, seeing this woman in such bad shape, obviously the first thing is the crane came down and everything's in ruins in the immediate area. When you have a collapse situation like that, where it's not a building collapse, but it's heavy machinery and they ain't much heavier than a crane coming down.
Right.
What do you do? Because not only do you worry about the destruction of buildings, you also worry about the stability underground, a water main getting busted, things of that nature. What happens in a scenario like that?
Well, every scenario is unique. So there's, like we say in emergency, there's no two alike. And there's really, for all my years in the job and all my thousands of emergency service responses, I can honestly tell you there's never been two alike. I have never seen two alike. So for that case, what they needed to do was they needed to bring in a massive, huge crane to lift that upside down crane off of Mrs. Gurney. So that took hours. It took hours and hours for that crane to make its trip from wherever it came to come down to the scene and lift that crane off. Now, she was under that crane begging to have her legs chopped off. Please take my legs off, get me out from under the crane. And of course, there were hundreds of emergency service cops there. One of the key men running that job from the construction resolution point of view was George Toth, Senior George Toth, who since passed away. He was a big factor in managing, all of the cribbing and the securing of that crane. But at the time, Paul Raganese, he had a relationship with Monsignor at the time, Kowski. You probably know now today Monsignor Romano, who's our police chaplain. But at the time, that was he has passed away, was Monsignor Kowski. And Kowski and Raganese had a very close relationship. They were both aligned through the Holy Name Society, through the Catholic Church, and so forth. So when Mrs. Gurney wanted to die, she wanted to have her confession told, and they couldn't send the Monsignor down there; it was too dangerous. So they had to send an E-man. So who got the job? Paul Raganese. And Paul was an interesting guy. He fell into all kinds of situations and ended up just luckily surviving and being successful at many different dangerous jobs. So he gets the communion and the blessing of the Monsignor to go down and hear Mrs. Gurney's confession and give a communion. And then the hours went by, and eventually the big crane came down and lifted her off. She goes to Bellevue, and they miraculously get her legs back again and get her working. And it was a miracle in all respects. But like I said, every one of those jobs is unique, and it requires that certain magical touch or ability to fix. And in that case, the only thing that was going to lift that crane up was a bigger crane.
And not only speaking about your experiences, but by extension, in doing that, helping others. Now, I mean, granted, it never goes away. It's been almost 21 years, and certain people say it still feels like yesterday, and that's understandable. Others say it feels like a lifetime ago, but it's always there, is the point. But for you, what's been the most rewarding part about not just talking about what happened to you, but getting the chance to speak with others who've been through something similar and helping them?
I had aligned myself with an organization called the Feel Good Foundation, which is a foundation that was made up by wasn't a police officer. He was a demolition supervisor, John Field, and he was working down at Ground Zero. I think it was on September 17th. He was backing out a truck with steel beams on it, and one of the beams fell off the truck and landed on his foot. And he wound up losing half his foot, and then he took his pain and suffering and started this foundation to help other 9/11 responders. And I joined up with him, and we spent about literally 5 years going back and forth to Washington, D.C. to get the Zadroga bill passed. And we finally did, so that was very rewarding. But I also had the opportunity to speak to other police officers and firefighters and military members on the lawn of the Capitol one day about post-traumatic stress disorder. And I tried to make an emphasis that all of us big tough guys who go in, break doors down, go in at the guys with guns or run into a burning building or are in combat in the military, we're all tough guys, but there's only so much you can take. Our brains are like sponges, and when you go on the first bad job, your brain will absorb a little bit of it, and then the next time you see something really bad, it absorbs a little bit more. You can't squeeze that sponge out. There's no way to get rid of the memory of that happening, and then eventually you get to a really bad job, and that sponge is full now, There's no way of getting out what you saw, but there's no room for any more. And that's what I think happened to me. But going out and helping other responders who were dealing with the same type of an issue, post-traumatic, was very rewarding to me. And I got such great reception by all these people, you know, coming over to me and saying, thank you for speaking about that. Because let me tell you something, Mike, 9/11 is what changed the outlook or the view of what post-traumatic stress really was. Before 9/11, if you were a cop and you were diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, they put you in the rubber gun squad and nobody would want to work with you. That has all changed now. You know, people realize now that it's okay to have post-traumatic stress. A civilian can walk outside and see somebody get hit by a truck and they're going to have post-traumatic stress. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you or you're crazy. And that's what people finally have acknowledged. And now, because of that, people that are suffering from that are seeking the help that they need. And I believe it saved a lot of lives, and it's still saving a lot of lives because of that.
I remember going out to lunch. My boss took me out to lunch, Jackie Mulk Moscow. And she was like, what do you want to do? And it was the first time I actually said it where I was like, I think I want to pursue this thing in TV. And anybody else who I had ever said that to, where they were like, do you see how few people make it on TV? Do you see this? It's like never going to happen. And she was the first person. And I like need to reconnect with her to tell her this, to be like, I could see that would be so great. You should do that. And there was we got some sort of like a outplacement service because we had all been laid off. So I met with this woman and I told her that, and she was like, okay, there's like a couple of different programs. So I found a course at NYU, and then I found this digital journalism program at the New York Film Academy, which at the time, NBC, like our teacher was from NBC. So I was like, all right, let me just try it. I'll try it for 4 weeks. I spent like more money on that in 4 weeks than I spent like on my college education. And I was hooked. And so I extended it to 8 weeks, to 1 semester, and then to the whole year. So then I graduated with a degree, or I guess a certificate, I should say, in digital journalism. But this is like before people were like, we didn't have iPhones really. Like, I think like the iPhone just came out, but like very few people had it. So I was forced into taking a risk. I need to be forced into risky situations. Like, I think that's the accountant in me. I don't like it, you know?
We'll say discipline nearly to a fault.
Yeah,
That's a good way. That's a good way of describing it. So
I think part of the problem with the news business today is that boring doesn't make any money. There's no profit in boring, and so they do everything they can to gin up the ratings, and they do that by sensationalizing the stories and the coverage, and that's unfortunate. I think that's kind of the downfall of the news business today. But that's a whole other tangent we can get into on another day.
Let me ask you, the national aspect of news, different story, but locally, especially in New York, where you've spent so much of your career, do you like the direction it's heading in locally, at least?
No, not really.
Why is that?
Opinion journalism is taking over. And, what is it about the news that makes the news so valuable? Facts. And, that day that Kellyanne Conway said that there are alternate facts was, I think, a very dark day for all of us in the news business, because as soon as you start talking about alternate facts, which is just opinion, you lose the trust of your audience. And if you lose the trust of your audience, then there's no point in going on TV. I mean, you have to speak the truth, and people have to respect you for that. And if they don't, everybody has an echo chamber that they are listening to now. And so I think we're responsible for our own demise at this point. All this, opinion journalism, if you want to hear opinions in the news, then turn to Trevor Noah or Steve Colbert, because at least they're entertaining. But everybody has an opinion. You remember Daniel Patrick Moynihan that, had that great line, you're entitled to your own opinion. You are not entitled to your own facts. And at this point, everybody's entitled to their own facts. And if your facts don't match my facts, then I'll turn the channel and watch somebody who will validate the facts that I feel, and that's then there's no point in having a news
Another
operation.
great story about a fire, another standpipe building in Brownsville.
Mhm.
We go over there. It was a night tour. I think it was about, I'm working, I think it was about 7:00, comes in, fire, top floor, multi-story building, standpipe job again. So we go there, we're second due, 120 and 231 had the fire. So we get up there and 231's guys there, they're getting in line set up. We had their control guy said, all right, you move up. We'll get you straightened out here. The guy's hooking up to the standpipe. The guys are stretching the line to the door. I'm in the hallway. I hear on the radio, the roof guy's talking about there's 6 people at a window and he's setting up for a roof rope rescue. I mean, this is way up there. I mean, 12th floor, 11th floor. And meanwhile, the hallway's charged. So the lieutenant's calling him on the radio going, hold up. I think we're going to get it, And I think in the apartment, there was 6 in the back. There was like 11 people total in the apartment. So I'm in the hallway in the smoke and they were ushering them past. I think the fire was in the kitchen. They were holding it and getting the people out so the people could walk through. So I feel somebody bumping me. I feel somebody else bumping me. 231 gets water. We start their water. And I'm standing like up close to the apartment door in the smoke. And all of a sudden on my turnout coat, I feel bang, bang, bang. Somebody pulling on my coat, So what happens? Initially, I'm like, I'm jumping, I mean, what is that? I look down and the smoke clears a little bit. And there's this little girl. And I'm telling you, she couldn't have been more than 4 or 5. All right. I look down at her. She looks up at me and in a clear, calm voice, she says to me, Mr. Fireman, are we going to die tonight? I'm like, I hope not, sweetie. I hope not, And now I'm thinking to myself, Jesus, kid, I just started an hour. I got 14 more hours, and you're asking me if I'm going to die tonight, So I take her by the head. I said, come on, me. I get her back down. I mean, this kid was as calm as can be. Maybe she had been into a fire before. I don't know, but she was calm as can be. So I walk her down the hallway. I get her back to the stairwell, and I turn her over to the family that was in the apartment there. I don't even know how she got out of the apartment. Whether she walked out herself. I don't know what happened, but it was crazy. But I was just so happy that the men didn't see me walking hand in hand with her, because we got back to the firehouse. You know what it would have been? Hey, you ought to see this 4-year-old girl rescuing the lieutenant, taking him back to the stairwell. But talk about out of the mouths of babes. When she said that to me, I couldn't believe it. I just said, I hope not, sweetie. I'm like, it's like, it was
at that age, though, they're brutally honest.
Oh my God. And she, it was funny because she was just below the smoke a little bit and it cleared. And I see this little kid and she was tiny. I'm telling you, it was just, I couldn't believe it. Fortunately for the people in the apartment, the truck, they got the fire, the engine got the fire down. They didn't have to slide off the roof, thank God, to try to rescue 6 people. And, the truck, the engine, they did a great job and they got the fire. And, but that was quite an event, that little girl. And, that's something you never forget. I can almost see her face looking up at me now and just, I'm like, really? But, that was another night tour in 290 engine.
Task force deployment where we helped clear some flooded out houses and some commercial establishments and look for victims. That was a great opportunity to go up and apply our rescue skills and our urban search and rescue training. We got to put that to test on that deployment. But for the most part, my interaction with the whole FEMA team was more just doing all the training, getting to know the equipment, and participating, helping the guys that were really the pros to go ahead and let them go and do those jobs.
Especially again in 2010 when the earthquake in Haiti struck. I mean, again in 2012 back here stateside when there was Superstorm Sandy, which that was not a thunderstorm. That was something that you have certain areas of New York and New Jersey still recovering from that storm almost a decade later.
I think I hit every borough the night of Superstorm Sandy. I started out in Manhattan, Then Brooklyn, we hit Queens, and then I wound up in Staten Island in the morning hours, and I think I pulled about 52 people out of their homes in the South Beach section of Staten Island.
So, in addition to your duties as an E-man, it kind of goes hand in hand. I mean, not only are you an instructor at STS, you're an instructor privately, and you still have that business post-retirement.
Yeah.
So, getting the chance, and I love this because I see sometimes Stefanakis post it too, you're getting the chance to not only lend your expertise locally at the STS to newcomers in emergency service, you're getting to do it nationwide. And everybody looks to New York. You know, the big cities with the big police departments, LA, Chicago, certain police departments in Texas like Dallas or Houston, and New York. They're looking at you guys because with such a big city, you've handled all the big jobs. You've been so battle tested. And not only have you been battle tested, you've been proven too, you know, as we talked about throughout tonight with various emergencies. So, you know, tell me about some of the best memories you have of getting the chance to interact with people who, no matter where they work, took the same oath, have the same mindset.
So in any issue, you know the saying, you know, when a citizen needs help, because when the police need help, they call you.
Right.
So when I retired, I feel like I'm still continuing that mission because I work in the law enforcement field as a product representative. And we do some training. We show the guys some of the best equipment that's out there. And I get to go and train the different police departments on all these different types of equipment. So I feel like I'm continuing the same mission that I had when I was in ESU as an STS instructor, training up the new guys. I feel like I can do that now post, you know, police career in my retirement and still pass on that knowledge. And I can tell you that I've had agencies from LAPD, from tier 1 military units, whether it's a piece of kit or they're just looking at, you know, some of the jobs that we've been on. You know, we've done a lot of deep dives into the 9/11 response with various units. They all want to know about it. And I kind of pass on some of the lessons that we've learned and some of the things that we do. And one of the things that I was most proud of was not too long after 9/11, myself and 2 Suffolk County ESU cops went out to a auto extrication event in Ohio. And we were able to pass on our knowledge about auto extrication to a bunch of different fire departments from Pennsylvania, Ohio, Illinois. All these different agencies came together for this extrication exhibition. And we showed them some of our tips and techniques, and we got from them as well. But they were really impressed by the fact that it wasn't an us versus them type of environment. You know, we just kind of shared our knowledge, and we did that. And I still continue to do that to this day, which is pretty satisfying.
2001, of course, 9/11 occurs, and a third, I believe, of the department's 343 casualties were from SOC. The squads decimated. Every man working the rescues that day lost. You know, it was tough. And in the midst of this, you have the flight going down in Rockaway, I believe, Flight 587. Then you mentioned the blackout in 2003, which wasn't terrorism, but nonetheless was a major emergency the city had to handle. And it was a rolling blackout, I believe. And in the midst of all this, you're trying to rebuild SOC, not from scratch, but definitely starting with the personnel that's left. That 2-year period from 01 to 03, I don't know how else to ask the question. How did you juggle it?
With a lot of help from my friends. Joe Cocker song, you know, get by with a little help from my friends. And that's what it was. I mean, everybody knew it was all hands on deck. This is an emergency. I mean, everybody from manufacturers, equipment manufacturers, agencies that gave us assistance. I mean, we needed all new rescue apparatus. I don't believe any of the rescue apparatus were able to be put back in service. So truck manufacturers put us in line and told other people, no, you got to wait. Yeah, I know you got stuff on order. These guys are getting priority. Equipment manufacturers did the same. The big challenges were personnel and training. We lost 95 people in special operations, and the average time on the job was about 16 years for each of them. So we don't take probies out of the fire academy and put them into a squad or a rescue. You have to have experience. So we had to recruit I didn't get involved in the company recruiting firefighters. That's the captain's responsibility. I told him, get your roster up. You got to go back out there and you're going to have to recruit. You know, unfortunately, some of the busier truck companies, you know, you got 5 rescue companies looking to come take their personnel, and they don't want to lose those people. So we had to kind of limit it. I told them, you know, no more than 3 people from any company. So you got to spread the wealth. That was a challenge. My challenge was to get the officers. That was my responsibility. Get replacement officers, and that was tough. The first people that you would go to would be guys who had gotten promoted out of a rescue or a squad, and some of them didn't want to come back, or they wanted to come back. I remember talking to a fellow and said, I need you to come back. He says, Chief, I would love to come back. My wife will divorce me if I go back into SOC. You know, the families knew, like you said, you know, the rescue squads in hazmat were wiped out to a man, except for one guy who was moving a rig. So they knew, and, you know, remember what else is going on that fall. That October, we started with the anthrax attacks. Those were real. There were 5 real weapons-grade anthrax attacks in New York City. This wasn't like the white powder runs that everybody else had. These were real dangerous attacks. So now, and who handles that? You know, that's a SOC responsibility. And the families are well aware of what's going on. And they told them, you can't, if you go back there, I'm afraid we're going to lose you. I can't be married to you under those circumstances, waiting for you not to come home one night. So it was very, very challenging to get people to step up. Fortunately, they did. You know, we got great, great people to step up. And but like some of them, Bobby Morris was a great, great fire officer. He was a captain in Ladder 28 up in Harlem. I've known Bobby for 10 or 15 years. And when I said, I need the captain in Rescue 1, Bobby, would you take it? And he didn't want to go to Rescue 1. He was very, very happy up in 28 truck. It was a great place. I said, Bobby, I need you. We need a great leader there. And he said, John, Bobby had very limited SOC experience. He had been a firefighter in Rescue 3 for a very short time. And he went back to, I think it was 42 at the time, because he missed the first 2 truck work. And Rescue 3 wasn't doing any first 2 work because they were in a house with 45 truck. So they didn't do first 2 truck work like Rescue 1, Rescue 2, even 4 and 5. Bobby, please, please, please. I can teach you, you know, you're going to have those senior guys. You're going to have guys like Hashagen there. They know the technical stuff. I need you for your leadership, presence on the fire ground. And Bobby stepped up. So many great people did step up. But that was like you said, tough 2 years. 2001 to 2003 was all hands on deck. I mean, 16, 17 hours a day at times. And I mean 6 and 7 days a week. So we got through it with a lot of help from
And this we can get on the air now, as I promised we would. I want to thank you because there are 2 people that are pivotal to a mini-series I launched on this show that really changed the show. One of them is in the chat, Detective Bill Ryan of the Arson Explosion Squad. The other one's you, because when I graduated college, one of the gifts I got was a book I'd been trying to read for the longest time but couldn't get my hands on. And that was Bomb Squad: A Year Inside the Nation's Most Exclusive Police Unit, which allowed me in turn to get to know so many of the guys from the Bomb Squad: Kevin Barry, Jeff Oberdier, Jim Carano, Paul Perricone, Brian Hearn, who'll be on the show this Friday, Brian Coughlin, who I know through LinkedIn, you know, and so many other just great guys, Dan McNally, you know, that I read about in that book. So here they are in 2004. They're coming off their 100-year anniversary. They started in 1903. It's a new time for them. They're getting a lot of cops coming in from emergency service in the spring of 2002. The Knucklehead Nine, as Jim Carano had called them. They're still trying to come to terms with 9/11, where they lost Dan Richards. What made you want to take on that project?
So right after 9/11, Nightline assigned me to cover Ground Zero. And I did 4 full episodes, half-hour episodes, about Ground Zero and about the bomb squad. The reason the bomb squad came into play was because 9/11 was a bombing, in a sense. So after 9/11, there were fears of a nuclear bomb possibly in New York. There were fears of other attacks. The NYPD very graciously let me go to work with the bomb squad. They and we did these episodes of Nightline that were really could not have been done without the generosity of everybody in that squad, who made their lives available to us, whether it was personal, professional, and they let us stay in their squad rooms. Ted Gerstein and I, one of us was in that squad room just about every day. So this is before the book. We had gone to bomb school. They let us go down to Alabama to the Redstone Arsenal, and Ted and I spent about 2 weeks down there. So the U.S. Army and the FBI, they let us see what it takes to become a bomb technician. Later, during the writing of the book, I got to go and witness advanced post-blast school. My role in this was to pick up the pieces on the floor. I didn't do anything except, here, you go collect the stuff we blew up, kid, and put it in the bag. We'll show you how evidence is collected. It was clearly a story that needed to be told. And we were working for ABC. ABC is part of Disney. They also have a publishing company, Hyperion. And Hyperion said, hey, we've watched these TV pieces. Maybe somebody wants to do a book on this. I went down to Public Information when Michael Looney was DCPI, then a great guy. And I said, I'd like to do a book on this. We have a publisher who's interested. And I can assure you that it will be a positive book because these guys do a positive job. He got the approval of the police commissioner for me to do the book. Then I went to the bomb squad where they all had to buy in before we got an okay. So the whole squad decided whether we would be there or not. I think only one person didn't want us there. And later in the course of the book, he came up and said, you turned out to be a pretty good guy. And that was nice. But that's how we got there to the book, by an unusual path. We did the TV shows, then we did the book. But the skill sets that these guys have, and you now know who they are pretty phenomenal. Yes. Whether it's lock picking, taking apart a hand grenade, opening a suitcase that has 5 different trips on it that could blow up, doing it in a 90-pound suit. When we went to bomb school, we got to put on that suit, and I'm like, how do these guys do it? You lose 5 pounds in 10 minutes walking in this suit. I did a 12-minute walk. And, there's some bomb technician who runs the marathon in that suit. Don't ask me how people can do this, but 12 minutes was enough for me. We became a part of their family. They really welcomed us. They shared their files going back 100 years in their basement. They had all the material going back to Giuseppe Petrosini, and who was the first and only bomb technician killed overseas. People like Hearn, took us under their wing. People like they have, Lieutenant Torrey, who runs the bomb squad, educated us in many ways. But the most important thing is they told us their own stories. They told us about their lives. We understood how their families took it. Remember, behind every one of these people is a family. So every person that goes out and stands in front of a bomb has a wife, a daughter, a son, a brother, wondering, I hope Brian or, Mark comes back tomorrow, because this thing can blow up. You've seen pictures of bombs blowing up on 23rd Street, right? A bomb blew up. Bomb blew up in Central Park a few years ago. The suit will protect you. Sometimes you don't have it on. Sometimes the bomb is too big. So my own daughter, when we would go out on these jobs, one night she lived with me 2 weeks of the month, and she said, "Hey, Pop, you're going to leave me here. How do we know you're going to come back?" And I said, "Well, I don't stand over the bomb. I stand behind the guy that stands over the bomb. So I'll be fine. Don't worry. I'll be back later." But just think of what their families risk. Every cop's family takes a risk. Every firefighter's family, journalist families take risks. You can see what's happening in Ukraine. Reporters are getting killed. But they let us see how their families felt. And the guys who had retired already, whether it was, Senf or Pastorella, they showed us their injuries, how they got their injuries, what it felt like. We talked to their sons, their families. It was a pretty amazing year for Ted Gerstein and I to, journalists don't get a year, and they shared everything, good, bad, and different. As you know, you read the book. It's not like they didn't tell us things that weren't going well. They did. And it was an amazing experience.
The office was empty because, Bill, you were with Jerry Sheehan and Jim Carano because Jimmy was getting a Detective of the Month award at Russo's on the Bay. I remember Danny McNally saying it was his day off. Joe Dolan was with Davey Martinez giving a training, ironically, on officer-involved shootings because they had shot the terrorists in Brooklyn in '97. So in the office was Kevin Barry, Mike O'Mixon, Faith Beiser, and I think that was it. And you were down the street. You were unfortunately kind of Johnny on the spot that morning because you were down the street working an off-duty job. You were in your trailer, and the trailer rocked. And Brian, I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah. I was working, believe it or not, as I say, I was cleaning up my stuff. I found the logbook from that day that I was working with Mike Castellano, a former bomb guy, EDC handler from the bomb squad. We were working in a company that had the contract to protect the stock exchange. And I was in there at 7 o'clock in the morning, and Mike and I were just, doing our thing, getting ready for checking things coming in. And we're in the trailer, and we hear a lot of commotion going on. And with that, he pokes his head out and he's going, "What the heck is going on here?" And bub. And people, papers are flying around and everything. So we had a radio and we turned it on, and somebody said, there might have been a small plane hit the towers down at the World Trade Center. So with that, I called the office because I'm off duty, and I said, I get Faith Beiser, as a matter of fact, and she's a good girl and good people. And I said, "Faith, what's going on down here?" She goes, "Where are you right now?" I said, "Well, I'm working the trailer." And she says, "Okay, if you can make your way over to Vessian Church, it seems like guys are going to go down and they're going to meet up down there. It looks like it might be a Cessna that went down into the plane, into the building." And I said, "Oh, all right, okay." And I said, "I'm going to put me in the book, and I'm going to start heading over that way as soon as I close up the trailer." Well, the gates came down, people running out of the stock exchange and papers. With that, the building, the trailer rocks again. That's when the second one hits. And you got stuff flying all over. And Mike goes, "Okay, I'll catch up with you. I'll lock up and do what I got to do, and I'll catch you." "Vessian Church?" I said, "Yeah, Vessian Church." So I started off. I walked up Wall Street over to Vesey, and it was just weird, just with all the papers and everything flying, going by the cemetery. But we get to Vesey, and I start walking down, and it was weird. Why I say it was weird? If you ever watch some of these old movies of the Holocaust and all that, and you see the personal property and warehouses and that, Vesey Street had nothing but shoes and pocketbooks. People ran out of their shoes. It was just wall-to-wall shoes and personal stuff just laying there. Like, people just ran. And I'm like, man, what the heck is going on? And then you start hearing the banging noise going off. And it's like, what the heck is going on? And then you come down a little more. Now you're able to get a view of the building, and you see the damage. And you actually see the people jumping out of the plane, jumping out of the building. And it's like, what the hell is going on here? And I'm walking down, I get to the corner of Vessian Church, and what was funny, there was Claude standing right there with his blue helmet on and his jumpsuit. And I'm looking at him going, what are you doing here? He says, that office, it's a zoo. It's crazy up there. I said, oh, okay. All right. And then on the other corner, as I'm standing there, you're looking at a whole set of landing gear sitting there, and you knew that from Flight 800. So you're sitting, this is a fiasco, and you can smell the fuel and everything else. With that, Danny pops up. He's standing there, and Kevin Barry and Michael Mixon, they dropped the truck right on the corner of Vessian Church. And okay, so we're like, okay, let's put something together. And we're trying to figure out, everybody's trying to interject something in that. So the game plan is, what we're going to do is we're going to go up the stairs. And as we're going up, more guys start popping up. And again, I know Steve Lanos came from the truck. It came flying down. But as we're walking across the street, we get stopped by a couple of people that we knew from the first Trade Center. This is what was crazy. But what happened was Danny, come on, we got to keep going. We got to keep going. So the one guy stops us and he grabs Kevin and I. Kevin's standing there. And again, he's like, we're going to get going. But we talked to this guy to see if we get some information. And he goes, he's from the ATF. And he says, typical cop, black humor. Do you believe this? I lost another car in the garage again. Okay, because what happened in the first one? All the feds lost their cars in the garage. So he says that. He says, I lost another car. Again, the little black humor. But at that time, the boys, they separated and they got up ahead of us. And I'm watching them going up the stairs. Like, Kevin goes, come on. So we start going up the stairs and everything else. And then Mike was with Claude and Danny, and they're going off, and then they made a right, and I saw them going through a mezzanine. They disappeared. With that, a body came flying down, and we're standing there, and Kevin, we look up, and we're going, all of a sudden, you heard, it sounded like, if you ever watched the old World War II submarine movies, when they shoot depth charges, a very faint banging noise you heard. And it was like, what the heck? You heard like a boom, and you heard it going, and it started going, boom, boom. Looking up, and I'm watching a piece of stainless steel. I'm stopped, looking at a piece of stainless steel come down like a leaf, but a person's going flying right by it. And with that, Kevin's going, the building's coming down, Brian. And I go, oh, God. Now I'm looking where they went, and they went in, and we're not going to make it that way. I came back down the stairs, and I went over to the Catholic Church. I was looking at the FBI federal building there, and knowing from emergency service, the train school, you have manways in the subways. If you go into the manway, the train don't hit you. So I figured if I go in there, the building slides down in front of me, I won't get hit with a piece of concrete or anything. But I couldn't get over that way, so I went into the church over there, the Catholic Church. And as I made the turn, I got there, and the building is flying down. And Kevin went straight, and for some strange reason, I heard maybe 2 shots, and maybe something else happened. I don't know if Kevin was involved in that, but maybe the door went down, and he got into the deli on the corner, and I got into the church. With that, all you saw was the dust coming by and everything going by us and everything like that. And with that, there was a French film crew in there, and an emergency lieutenant came in with his shoulder all screwed up. I had a big gash, and being a former altar boy, I went up and took the sheets to corporal and I had off and used the holy water just to wash him down a little bit, and then I went back outside. So he was being taken care of by somebody else, but he had a large gash in his shoulder. And as I came out, all of a sudden you heard the jets flying over, and I dove under an emergency truck. I don't know why. I landed under the emergency truck thinking maybe another plane was coming in for the next pass. We get up, and all you got is that white dust and everything all over the place. And I'm going, now I know they went up, but you couldn't get up there anymore. And with that, it got really crazy. Now you see the building's gone, it's down. And then Kevin comes over, and he's looking at me like, we got to do something. I said, yeah, we got to do something. Which way do we go? We don't know which way to go because you can't see anything. And next thing I hear my name called, and I'm going, well, I don't know if it's Jesus Christ, but somebody's calling me here. And with that, who is it? But it's a gentleman by the name of Manny Morales. And again, I didn't explain to you, Staten Island being where all the chiefs and everybody come from, the highway unit became the more or less the wheelmen for all the first steps in the PC's office. The first step, the PC, all of them through the years always came out of Highway 5 because they lived on the island. Well, this gentleman I worked with when he was there is a highway officer. He's now a sergeant in, in the first steps office. And he's coming out of the fog and out of this mess. And he goes to me, he says to me, hey, you got a car here? And I look at Kevin. Kevin, do we still have the keys to the wagon? He says, I have a set, Mike's got a set. And I said, oh, okay, what do you need them for? He says, I got the boss with me. I'm going, you got the boss? What do you mean you got the boss? He says, he's standing right there with a pair of crutches under him, and he's got a cast on him. And his other two bodyguards are with him. And I go, all right, so what do you need? He's the highest political person in the city that's still alive that we know. We thought we lost Giuliani and we lost Carrick. We thought they were gone because they were on the other side when things went down. That's what Manny told me. I'm sitting there going, so he's now the PC and the mayor or whatever you want to. He said, yeah. I said, okay. So we grab him. As I grab him, I said, come on, you gotta go up to NYPD. He goes, I'm not going anywhere. And he starts directing. Joe Dunn is directing everybody with the crutches and everything. And I said, sir, you're the last guy in charge. We need you up in 1PP. He goes, no. Well, his guys got in the back of 3501, and he's standing there, and they're yelling at me, get him in the car, get him in. I take my fist, and I hit him in the chest, straight on, to get him in the car. He gets in the car, he's looking at me like, you hit me. I said, get in the goddamn car. That's what you got to do. With that, Kevin took us up to 1PP. With that, we put him in there, and we left. We came back to the office. When we got back to the office, Stevie Burbridge was sitting on the wall, holding his knee. Joe Dolan blew a knee out, holding his knee. Danny's sitting there, and he was holding his shoulder or his elbow or something. He had a cut or something. And I'm counting, and I said, okay, where's Danny? He's gone. What? He's gone. And they might not remember saying it, but they said it very softly. And these guys were hurting. They were hurting. So they were in there. I was outside. As I'm pushing Dunn into the car, the second building lets go, and it's falling right on us. A piece of it hits the back of 3501 as we're leaving with him in the front seat. I know it sounds corny to laugh, but it was like, how lucky can you be if 2 buildings fall on you? I'm sorry, you know, but it was crazy. So we come back, and that's when I found out that we lost him. And I saw him, and I talked to him, and everything. And it just bothers me that I should have been there, and it's just that's that. And it was a long day after that, going back and forth, up and down, doing what we got to do.
And that's when we came into, you know, the first call we received was a boat in distress with people in the water. I think the first call into 911 came from probably, I think, a Parks Department personnel there at Fort Taunton, killed in Rockaways, where they heard screaming in the night, you know, voices in the water going on. They went to investigate and noticed a ship out just offshore and people coming ashore from the water. That started off the 911 call to all emergency services. We were in Brooklyn at the time. We were one of the 2 dive rescues in the FDNY, Rescue 5 and ourselves. I don't believe Rescue 4 was scuba qualified at that time, but they had water capabilities for surface rescue. The companies on the beach in Rockaway, a lot of companies there themselves. So one of the things we looked at was, you know, getting a call. Normally, you know, at that time of year in Breezy Point, Rockaways, it's that time of year, a lot of fishermen are out with their boats. They're getting their boats in the water for the first time. A lot of them are not used to, you know, going in the surf and you know, navigating the water. We got a lot of boats running to the ground, into the jetties there. And normally throughout the summer, we got a lot of calls for persons in the water, persons in distress, or even boats in distress in that area. So we're not unfamiliar with that area. So the call came in probably about 2 o'clock, 2:30 in the morning for us as a normal, you know, boat sinking, people in the water. That's the initial information we received in quarters. And at that time, we just, you know, got on. We had, you know, divers on board already. I was driving that night, so just luckily for us, just head down Flatbush Avenue, 2 o'clock in the morning. Very little traffic, so we made it there very quickly. Luckily, the scene itself was right over on the other side of Rockaway, on the beach side, right opposite the Marine Parkway Bridge. So right down Flatbush Avenue over the bridge, we were right there. The first 2 companies in Rockaway were already in the, you know, on the beach, sizing things up. And as we got closer, reports started getting a little bit more detailed about a larger boat, larger vessel with multiple people in the water. You know, going there, we still didn't know what was going on. You know, whether it was a small boat, a fishing boat, a fishing party boat, what type of boat it was. So, you know, until we got there and get eyes on ourselves, we really didn't know what we were going to encounter when we was, you know, arrived on scene.